The Jedi Knights were guardians of peace and justice for over 1,000 generations. But their story didn't begin with the Republic, and it didn't always look like what we see in the films. 36,000 years before the Republic was founded, the first Force users gathered on a world called Tython, deep in the galactic core. They called themselves the Jedi, and they believed something the modern Jedi would never accept: that both light and darkness were necessary, and only imbalance was dangerous. For 10,000 years, they walked this path, channeling both light and dark in harmony. But balance is fragile, and wars, betrayals, and forbidden knowledge would eventually tear their world apart, forcing the survivors to abandon everything and rebuild on a new foundation. This is the complete history of the Ancient Jedi Order, from their origins on Tython to their transformation into the Guardians of the Galaxy. I've gone through all the legend sources to tell their full story, so enjoy. In 36,453 BBY, 9 massive pyramid-shaped vessels appeared in the deep core, the galaxy's most dangerous region, where black holes crushed entire star systems and gravitational forces tore ships apart. 8 of these world ships, called the Yor, had spent centuries traveling across the galaxy. They did not come as conquerors. They did not demand tribute or slaves. Instead, they called, and Force-sensitive beings across dozens of worlds felt a pull they could not resist. Humans from distant colonies, Wookiees from Kashyyyk's forests, Miraluka who saw through the Force rather than physical sight, Twi'leks from Ryloth's caves, species that had never met and did not share languages or cultures, all answered the summons. What they did not know was that this journey would change the galaxy forever. The Yor gathered these Force sensitives and carried them to Tython, a world pulsing with raw Force energy in the heart of the deep core. The Yor navigated these hazards effortlessly, guided by the Force through passages that should have been impossible. The pilgrims who arrived found a planet unlike any other in known space. 2 moons hung in Tython's sky, and the Force sensitives immediately sensed their opposing natures. They named the bright moon Ashla, representing the light side of the Force with its compassion, serenity, and peace. The dark moon became Bogan, embodying the dark side's passion, strength, and rage. Between these 2 extremes, Tython itself maintained a delicate balance. The settlers would soon learn a harsh truth. The balance was not symbolic, it was survival. When that balance tipped too far in either direction, Force storms erupted across the planet's surface. These storms were pure Force energy given physical form, releasing lightning that turned stone to vapor and winds that could kill instantly. The Jedi who embraced too much passion without balancing it with calm would tip the scales toward chaos. The planet enforced balance through deadly consequences, not philosophical debate. Their survival depended on maintaining equilibrium between light and dark. From this practical necessity, the Jedi Order was born, the first organized Force tradition in recorded galactic history, predating the Jedi Order by over 10,000 years. With the Order established, the Jedi began constructing their temples across Tython. The 8 Yor that had traveled the galaxy joined the 9th already on Tython. Each settled across the planet's continents, choosing locations strong in the Force. Around each vessel, the Jedi built a great temple. This process took decades as pilgrims from different worlds learned to work together despite speaking different languages and coming from vastly different cultures. As construction progressed, each temple developed its own specialty. The Temple of Science taught how the Force interacted with the physical universe, exploring the relationship between energy and matter. The Temple of Martial Arts developed combat forms that mixed offensive power with defensive control. The Temple of Healing showed how the same Force energy could mend wounds or cause them, teaching students to understand life and death as 2 sides of the same ability. The 9 Temple Masters formed the Jedi High Council to govern the entire order. They elected one among themselves to serve as leader of the council, a role that often fell to Master Ketu, who had been trained by Master Rajavari during the Order's early generations. The The former pilgrim became the voice of balance for the new order. Ketu taught a philosophy that would guide the Jedi for many generations. Neither Ashla nor Bogan was superior. The light was not better than the dark. The dark was not stronger than the light. Both were necessary parts of a greater whole. Both were dangerous when used alone. To guide their understanding of this balance, the Jedi developed a formal code. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no fear, there is power. I am the heart of the Force. I am the revealing fire of light. I am the mystery of darkness, in balance with chaos and harmony, immortal in the Force. This code became the Jedi's philosophical foundation for over 10,000 years. The opening line would prove important enough to survive even the Order's collapse, though future Force traditions would abandon the code's emphasis on embracing both light and darkness equally. Yet keeping this balance would test every generation that followed. The philosophy shaped every aspect of Jedi training. Students learned compassion for suffering, but also righteous anger at injustice. They practiced calm meditation, but realized that fear served as a warning system. They studied healing alongside techniques that could kill, understanding that the same Force energy could be used for opposite purposes. The Jedi strictly enforced their balance doctrine. Masters who showed signs of favoring one side were stripped of rank and authority. This was not punishment. It was recognition that an unbalanced master could not effectively teach balance to students. Those who continued in their imbalance faced exile. Exile to Ashla meant the Jedi had leaned too far toward the light side, becoming passive and disconnected from the physical world. Exile to Bogan meant they had embraced too much passion and aggression. In either case, the exile was temporary, lasting until the Jedi could find balance again. The exile would meditate alone, forced to face their imbalance without the structure and support of the temples. An unbalanced Jedi put not just themselves but the entire planet at risk. The environmental consequences were too serious to ignore. Centuries after the Thoyor arrival, the Jedi developed a formal training system. In 36,019 BBY, Jedi Master Nordia Graal changed Force training forever. Over the centuries, the Jedi had been training students informally at the 9 temples. Graal identified a problem. Young Force users needed structured basic training before they could benefit from the specialized instruction each temple offered. To address this, she created the rank of Journeyer for students beginning their path and established the Great Journey. The system was dangerous by design. Not every Journeyer completed their Great Journey. Some fell victim to Tython's dangerous landscapes and creatures. Others lost themselves by embracing extremes, channeling too much passion, or becoming too detached from the physical world. A few triggered force storms through imbalance, damaging training grounds and surrounding areas. Among Jedi, there was a saying, "Not everyone is lucky enough to finish their great journey." Graal created the rank of Journeyer for students beginning their path. This term recognized that Jedi training was about travel and experience rather than classroom study. She established a tradition that would define Jedi education for the next 10,000 years, the Great Journey. Every Jedi Journeyer was required to travel across Tython, training at each of the 9 temples in turn. This was not a simple tour. A Journeyer might spend years at each temple, fully learning that temple's specialty before moving to the next. They conducted dangerous experiments at the Temple of Science. They endured brutal sparring sessions at the Temple of Martial Arts. They treated actual injuries at the Temple of Healing, often working on wounds their own training partners had inflicted. Each temple pushed them in different ways. Each demanded mastery before allowing them to move forward. Through this journey, Journeyers experienced the full range of Force abilities. They could not focus so completely on one area that they lost their balance. A Journeyer who loved healing would still spend years learning combat. One who excelled at martial arts would still learn the patience required for meditation. The Great Journey lasted years, sometimes decades, depending on the student's ability and specific needs. Some students needed more time with healing to balance their aggressive nature. Others required longer combat training to overcome being too passive. Despite the training, many students failed these trials. Journeyers faced tests at each temple designed to challenge both their light and dark sides. They had to show compassion in situations that called for revenge, proving they would not be controlled by anger. They had to show righteous anger when mercy would allow cruelty, proving they would not be frozen by too much compassion. These trials were not practice exercises. They were real situations where their choices mattered. Failure had consequences. Journeyers who showed clear imbalance during their travels were exiled to Ashla or Bogan before they could complete their training. Only after completing the circuit and proving their mastery of balance could a journeyer be recognized as a full Jedi. This recognition came not from a single master, but from the combined judgment of all 9 temple masters. A Jedi who passed this final test could then focus on whichever aspect of the Force called to them, confident that their foundation was solid enough to prevent imbalance. Those who completed the Great Journey became a new kind of Force user. They could channel both sides of the Force as needed, using whichever served their purpose in any given moment. In battle, they could tap into passionate fury to overpower enemies, then immediately shift to calm precision for defense. In healing, they understood pain deeply because they had studied how to cause it, making them more effective at reversing damage. They became skilled warriors, talented healers, and wise advisors who grasped both the hopeful ideals of the light side and the practical truths of the dark side. For over 10,000 years, this balance held. The Jedi protected Tython from outside threats and settled internal disputes. They helped resolve conflicts among the planet's non-Force-sensitive tribes, using their powers to keep peace without taking sides. They explored nearby deep-core worlds, making limited contact with other systems while keeping Tython mostly isolated. The Jedi philosophy, taught by Master Ketu and passed down through every generation, became their guiding principle. Balance was not just an ideal, but a requirement for survival. They lived within the Force, using both light and dark as circumstances required, never favoring one side over the other. However, their isolation could not last forever. Tython's Force presence acted as a beacon visible across vast distances. But the greatest threat to the Jedi would not come from beyond the stars. It would come from within their own society, from those who believed that balance was a weakness rather than a strength. On the Rakatan homeworld of Lehon, thousands of light years away, Force hounds were already being trained to hunt down Force-sensitive worlds and enslave their populations. The Infinite Empire had conquered countless civilizations through overwhelming technology and enslaved Force users. Unbeknownst to the Jedi, before the Rakata could arrive, Tython would tear itself apart from within. By 25,805 BBY, over 10,000 years had passed since the Thoyor arrival. Tython's population had grown far beyond the original pilgrims. Humans and other species had built tribal kingdoms across the planet. For centuries, these tribes lived peacefully alongside the Jedi, viewing the Force users as wise protectors rather than rulers. One woman would shatter that peace: Queen Hadiya. She was a Twi'lek female who united many tribal kingdoms through conquest and charm. She ruled the Shikakwa kingdom with total authority. Those who resisted became slaves. Those who submitted paid tribute. Her vision was simple: unite all of Tython and other planets in the Tython system under her rule. As Hadiya expanded her influence, she began forcing the Shikakwa aristocracy to follow her laws. The Jedi stepped in, siding with the nobles who opposed her reign. Most aristocrats resisted either openly or in secret, unwilling to surrender their autonomy. The resulting conflict became known as the Despot War, a bloody campaign that would kill nobles, soldiers, and many Jedi warriors across Tython. The war touched families throughout the system. Baron Volnos Ox Rio, the middle sibling of 3 brothers, watched his father and older brother die for refusing to swear loyalty to Hadiya. When he inherited the title of Baron, he carried their defiance with him. His younger brother, Hawk Rio, served the Jedi as a ranger. Seeking to end the conflict, Baron Volnos arranged for a Jedi ranger named Dagan Locke to infiltrate Hadiya's camp. Locke's own father and older brother had been killed for refusing to submit to the Queen, giving him personal motivation beyond duty. With Volnos's endorsement, Locke posed as a disillusioned Jedi Ranger wishing to abandon the Order. Hadia accepted him without suspicion, impressed enough by his skills and knowledge to make him one of her generals. The deception proved dangerously effective. As Locke convinced Hadia of his loyalty, their relationship deepened beyond politics. She took him as her lover, granting him not only her trust, but access to her most closely guarded strategies and plans. He rose through her command structure, learning every detail of her military operations. Yet when the line between reality and deception blurred, Volnos reminded Locke of his mission: vengeance. When the moment arrived, Locke hesitated. Her beauty affected him deeply, and he questioned whether his pause came from the Jedi prohibition against assassination or from genuine emotion for the woman he had come to know. Finally, he found an unprotected place in her armor and struck. Assassination was forbidden among the Jedi, and Locke would carry the weight of that choice for years to come. After killing Hadia, Locke found his way out through the chaos of her collapsing command. He cut through an entire platoon of her best troops, leaving only one soldier alive to spread the news. With their queen dead, her generals turned on each other, fighting for control. Without Hadia's unifying presence, the alliance shattered within days. The coordinated military campaign collapsed, and to the rest of the Tython system, Locke became the hero of the Despot War. The conflict had spread across multiple fronts. During the war, the Battle of Caleth tested the Jedi's commitment to their principles. Temple Master Talat died in the fighting, forcing Master Keto to assume additional responsibilities at Caleth Temple, despite already leading the Council since the Order's founding. Among the casualties were Shakoda's parents, a loss that would shape her path for years to come. Beyond direct combat, the Jedi made difficult strategic choices. Manufacturing domes on Nox had been supplying Hadia with weapons, forcing the Order to act. They bombed 3 domes around Greenwood Station, though they warned the inhabitants beforehand. Greenwood Station's dome was breached but quickly repaired. Even with the warnings, thousands died in the attacks, a moral burden the Jedi would long debate. Following Hadia's death, a weak Krall was elected to rule Shikakwa, one the nobles could easily control. The kingdom became highly political, with alliances and treaties made and broken constantly as various factions maneuvered for advantage. The final toll was staggering. 100,000 Tythons had died, along with over 1 million of Hadia's forces, with many more injured. The war had been brutal but mercifully short, ending before it could consume the entire system. In recognition for his decisive role in ending the conflict, Dagan Locke was promoted to master rank. But victory brought him no peace. The visions that had haunted him during the war only intensified once the fighting stopped. Seeking answers, Master Dagan Locke and Hawk Rio descended into the chasm beneath Anil Kesh, the Temple of Science. This was no casual investigation. The chasm was a place of darkness where depth stretched down beyond measurement. No one had ever reached the bottom and returned unchanged. Something far below interfered with the Force itself, twisting perceptions and breaking minds. Some who had attempted to penetrate its depths had died. Others went mad. Deep within the chasm, both Locke and Hawk experienced a shared vision, a shadow army carrying swords of blazing light invading Tython. Upon their return, though, Hawk made a fateful decision. He lied to the Jedi Council, telling them that Locke was mad and that the vision was false. Hawk convinced himself that what he had seen was merely the chasm's corruption, not genuine prophecy. He wanted to convince himself that his friend was simply traumatized by war rather than face the implications of what they had witnessed together. The Council believed Hawk's testimony and concluded that Locke was out of balance. They imprisoned him on Bogan, the Dark Moon, hoping isolation would restore his equilibrium. Locke became known to some Jedi as the Prisoner of Bogan. It remained unclear whether he, mentally scarred from his experiences in the chasm, would ever be allowed to leave. On Bogan, Locke did not seek balance. Instead, He dwelled on the vision, certain it was a real prophecy rather than madness. While the Jedi Council dismissed his warnings, he planned for the invasion he knew was coming. He would turn out to be right far sooner than anyone expected. 12 years after the Despot War, the Mad Jedi's vision came true. In 25,793 BBY, a massive force storm erupted across Tython. The devastation matched the original storm from 10,000 years earlier when the Tho-Yor first arrived. The timing was not coincidental. The warning came first from the system's edge. Fury Station, positioned on the outer boundary of the Tython system, briefly detected a large incoming object from beyond known space. The ship vanished from sensors moments later, cloaked by technology the Jedi had never encountered. Jedi Ranger Hawk Rio, monitoring the transmission, warned other planets, including Tython, of a dark presence entering the star system. Far above Tython, a Rakatan ship called the Devourer had been sabotaged. Explosions tore through the vessel without warning. Praetor Tulkar, the ship's commander, screamed orders as his guards informed him the attack came from an enemy vessel, not the slaves aboard. In the chaos, no one noticed that one particular slave had already made his move. The ship carried Zesh, a force hound bred and trained from birth by the Rakata. The Rakata were an ancient species that had built the Infinite Empire, conquering thousands of worlds across the galaxy. They used force-wielding warriors called Force Hounds as slaves, weapons trained to hunt down force-sensitive populations for enslavement. The Rakata were known to many in the galaxy as the Builders, though their true nature was far darker than the title suggested. During the chaos aboard the Devourer, Zesh killed Praetor Tulkar. His memory was clouded by head trauma, and he did not remember why he had done it or what had happened before. Escaping in a pod, he crashed on Tython as the only survivor of the destroyed vessel. What Zesh did not know was that he had been sent to Tython as an unwitting spy. Praetor Skalnas, Tulkar's rival within the Rakatan hierarchy, had placed mental blocks in Zesh's memory before the Devourer's journey. Zesh had originally found Tython using his Forcehound abilities and reported its location to Skalnas. The sabotage and Tulkar's death were part of Skalnas' elaborate plan to eliminate his rival while positioning Zesh among the Jedi, where he could unknowingly gather intelligence about their weaknesses and capabilities. Zesh carried a force saber created by Rakatan technology. These weapons channeled the dark side of the Force through synthetic crystals into glowing energy blades. Unlike traditional weapons, the Force Saber boosted the wielder's emotions and Force presence, feeding on and amplifying dark side energy. The Force Saber's concentrated dark side energy, combined with the violent deaths of Force sensitives aboard the Devourer, triggered the massive Force storm. Tython's Force-sensitive environment reacted violently to this sudden influx of dark side corruption, just as it had always responded to imbalance. 3 Jedi journeyers experienced visions drawing them to the crash site. Shay Koda, training her Rancor Dragon Butch at Anil Kesh, sensed something dark falling from the sky. Master Quan Zheng confirmed her sensing and reported seeing a vision of a man in a mask. Tasha Rio, daughter of Baron Volnos Rio and Jedi Master Korra Rio, experienced a similar vision of the Shadow Man. Seknos Wrath also saw the same image. All 3 followed the Force call to find Zesh, drawn by a power they did not understand. A few hours after the crash, other Jedi arrived at the wreckage site. Master Quan Zheng came directly from Anil Kesh. Jedi Rangers Hawk Rio and Rory Fenn also arrived to investigate. Master Korra monitored the situation from Kaleth Temple, receiving transmissions remotely and coordinating the response. They found wreckage scattered across the landing zone, with mostly charred, alien-looking skeletons among the debris. The escape pod bore Orabesh symbols predating Praetor Tulkar, though none of them comprehended what that meant. Master Ketu, sensing the disturbance across the planet, warned that Tython was reacting to the mass death of Force sensitives. A huge force storm was developing, one that could threaten settlements across the entire world. Meanwhile, the 3 journeyers found Zesh emerging from his escape pod. His first word was death, spoken in a language none of them knew. The encounter immediately turned violent. A brief fight broke out as Zesh reacted with trained instinct. Shay gained possession of his force saber during the struggle, but the weapon cut through their steel blades like paper, demonstrating technology far beyond anything the Jedi possessed. Seknos attempted to activate the force saber, but could not make it ignite. The weapon required channeling the dark side, something his balanced training had not prepared him for. Zesh fled deeper into the rift, also called the Abyss of Ru, and the three journeyers pursued despite the obvious danger. Zesh suffered from head trauma and nightmare visions as he descended into the dark canyon. The deep abyss was filled with dark side energy that interfered with his already clouded mind. Shadows appeared around him, and those who died on the Devourer seemed to come for him, their faces twisted in accusation and agony. The three journeyers caught up to Zesh as he fought rift creatures drawn by the disturbance. Shay tried using the force saber against the beasts, but could not ignite it, lacking the dark side fury needed to power the weapon. Desperate, she threw it back to Zesh. He caught it instinctively and killed the massive Sarl creature threatening them all, his training overriding his confusion. Master Quan Jang arrived with Ranger Rory Fenn, quickly assessing the situation. His plan was direct. Quan Jang would focus on calming the storm, while others dealt with Zesh. The storm took priority as it threatened thousands of lives across Tython. Quan Jang centered himself in the teeth of the raging storm, feeling Tython tilted dangerously toward the dark side. The planet reacted violently to the imbalance. Seas churned, land writhed, winds tore at everything with increasing fury. Through the darkness and chaos, he sensed points of light, the other temple masters in meditation across Tython. His message had been received. They were as one, a conference of power spanning the entire world. Alone against the storm's fury, but supported by his fellow masters, Quan Jang meditated on the connection by which a Jedi is bound to all living things, dark and light. When balance is tilted and darkness overwhelms light, there is nothing left but to push back the darkness and allow the light back in. Quan Jang's coordinated force lightning, channeled through the other temple masters, struck Zesh with incredible power. The storm fed off Zesh, and he off it, creating a terrible cycle of amplification. Zesh screamed in defiance, but the massive lightning strike overwhelmed his defenses and knocked him unconscious. As his consciousness faded, the storm began to dissipate. Shay caught Zesh as he fell, preventing him from tumbling into the abyss. She held his force saber to his throat, filled with rage at what she assumed he had done. She thought Master Quan Jang was dead because of this stranger, and her grief demanded vengeance. Zesh, barely conscious, was expected to be eaten, according to Rakatan custom. He offered his heart as the honor portion, believing he had earned a warrior's death through combat. It was the only fate he had ever known for defeated warriors. In that moment, something extraordinary occurred. A vision of Shay appeared to Zesh through the Force, telling him that it was not the Jedi way. The Force Hound had never seen anyone willing to die protecting the fallen and weak. The concept was alien to everything the Rakata had taught him. 10 days later, at Maharakesh, the Temple of Healing, Masters Kale and Naro worked to heal Zesh's physical wounds. The process took days, as his injuries were severe and complicated by years of prior scarring. Master Quan Jang had also recovered from channeling such massive amounts of force energy. Healer Kale examined Zesh's many old scars and sensed something deeply troubling within him. There was no empathy, no love, no compassion, no light, only darkness, only shadow. Zesh did not even understand what a healer was, having never encountered the concept. He explained that he was what he was made to be, born a Force Hound and destined to serve his Rakatan masters. The idea of choice had never been presented to him. After careful consideration, the Jedi Council decided that Zesh was dangerously imbalanced in the Force and could wield dark power without restraint. He would be sent to Bogan to meditate, hoping that isolation and reflection might help him discover the light side of the Force and begin to understand balance. In time, he he might heal from what the Rakata had done to him. As Zesh departed for exile on Bogan, he thought perhaps in time he would understand the Force as the Jedi did. He knew somehow that he would not stay on that moon forever. Something in Shay's vision had planted a seed of possibility that he had never imagined before. Dagan Locke was already imprisoned on Bogan when Zesh arrived. Watching the shuttle land and the strange warrior emerge, Locke knew his prophecy was finally unfolding. Meanwhile, on Tython, Jedi Master Rajavari consulted with Master Turs Sendin at Akar Kesh, the Temple of Balance. Sendin had discovered an ancient Qua holocron in the depths beneath Kaleth years earlier, but had been unable to activate it despite extensive meditation and study. The artifact remained frustratingly inactive, its secrets locked away. Jedi journeyer Tasha Rio, attempting to identify the alien remains from the Devourer, was brought to examine the holocron. When she touched it, the device activated immediately. Its gatekeeper, Anang of the Qua, appeared as a shimmering holographic figure. Anang identified the skull fragments as Rakatan and warned the assembled Jedi that their world was in terrible danger. Anang explained the Qua's tragic history. Through Infinity Gates, the Qua had once traveled the galaxy freely, visiting countless worlds, including the Rakatan homeworld of Leon. They had helped the Force-strong Rakata understand their power and given them advanced technology, believing they were uplifting a promising species. The Rakata, however, ignored balance and focused only on the dark side. They paired their natural aggression with Qua technology and began conquering world after world, calling themselves the Infinite Empire. The Rakata had discovered how to target planets rich in the Force, forcibly planting hate and fear in Force-sensitive beings and enslaving them to harness that dark energy as fuel for their warships. Entire civilizations had been consumed to power the Infinite Empire's expansion. When the Rakata demanded the secret of Infinity Gate technology, the Qua refused, finally understanding the mistake they had made. The Rakata declared war on their former teachers. Many Qua died holding off the Rakatan forces on Leon until the Infinity Gate there could be destroyed. Following this betrayal, the surviving Qua destroyed or disabled most remaining gates across the galaxy and retreated to their homeworld, Dathomir, withdrawing from galactic affairs in shame for having unleashed such evil. A few Qua had remained on Tython, including Anang, to guard against future threats. Realizing the crashed ship was a Rakatan scout vessel, the Jedi Council understood with growing horror that Locke's vision was coming true. The Shadow Army with blazing swords was real. They needed to prepare for war, and they needed to do so immediately. Zesh's captured Force Saber was sent to Vur Tepe, the Forge, where Temple Master Tem Medog examined it with increasing concern. The Cathar Master tested the weapon in his hottest forge, but could not affect the hilt's material. Through careful experimentation, Medog discovered the Force Saber required focus on dark side emotions to ignite. Shay Koda had activated it during the battle with Zesh when filled with anger and fear. Jedi Ranger Hawk Rio, who had spent time exiled on Bogan for his own imbalance, could also ignite it. Despite being a master, Tem Medog could not make the weapon respond. It rejected his balanced approach to the Force. The discovery revealed a troubling truth about the weapon's nature. The Force Saber represented dangerous technology that directly contradicted Jedi philosophy. Its power was undeniable, capable of cutting through any material the Jedi possessed. Yet relying on it meant drawing deeply on the darker side of balance, potentially corrupting those who wielded it regularly. The Jedi Council debated whether such a weapon was worth the risk, knowing they might need every advantage against the coming invasion. 1 year after Zesh's exile to Bogan, the invasion his arrival had signaled finally came. Unbeknownst to the Jedi, Praetor Skolnas's elaborate plan was already in motion. Another Force Hound named Trill had infiltrated the Tython system months earlier, posing as a refugee fleeing Rakatan oppression. Trill reported to Skolnas that Tython was extraordinarily rich in the Force and populated by Force-wielding warriors called Jedi, who showed concerning levels of organization and skill. More importantly, Zesh had been accepted among them due to the memory blocks Skul'Nas had implanted. He would unknowingly provide detailed intelligence about Jedi weaknesses, training methods, and defensive capabilities. Skul'Nas saw a tremendous opportunity in what others might view as a difficult conquest. If he could conquer Tython and enslave its Jedi, the Infinite Empire would gain thousands of Force Hounds in a single stroke. He also sought the Infinity Gate rumored to exist on Tython, the legendary Prime Gate that required no matching gate to function. With such technology, Skul'Nas could travel anywhere in the galaxy instantly, making the conquest of the remaining free worlds inevitable. Success here would elevate him to Over-Praetor of the entire Infinite Empire. In 25,792 BBY, the Rakatan Infinite Empire struck the Tython system with overwhelming force. The invasion began at the system's edges, methodically securing their approach. Rakatan forces destroyed the outpost at Fury's Gate, eliminating the early warning station before anyone could properly respond. They then captured the gas giants Obri and Mar, along with their moons, establishing staging areas for the assault on Tython itself. When the Rakata attacked Tython directly, they met fiercer resistance than expected. The Jedi Order pushed back the initial assault through coordinated force techniques and superior knowledge of their homeworld's terrain. Forced to retreat and reassess, the Infinite Empire shifted strategy. They captured the forest world of Skagora and established their forward command post, Rakatan Base Prime. Many Jedi died in the battle for Skagora, fighting desperately to prevent the foothold. The fall of this settled world shocked the other planets into action, making clear that this was no mere raid, but a full invasion. Wherever the Rakata conquered, they followed the same brutal pattern. They enslaved the population and left ruin in their wake. On every captured world, they forcibly planted hate and fear in Force-sensitive beings, using Sith alchemy and psychological torture to corrupt them. They then harnessed that dark energy to power their war machines, turning their victims into unwilling batteries for the Infinite Empire's weapons. Facing this existential threat, the Jedi Council realized they needed to coordinate their response. Master Rajavari was appointed General of the Allied Forces, commanding the joint armies of the Jedi Order and the Settled Worlds. His military experience and tactical mind made him the obvious choice. More controversially, the Mad Jedi Dagon Locke was recalled from Bogan to serve as a field commander. His vision had proven true, confirming his warnings. His willingness to embrace darker methods was now seen as necessary rather than dangerous. Zesh, having begun to understand balance during his year of exile, agreed to help the Jedi by sharing what he remembered about his former Rakatan masters, though his memories remained frustratingly incomplete. Facing annihilation, the Jedi Council made a critical decision. They would construct Force Sabers. Master Tem Medog began mass production at Vur-Tepe, the Forge. Zesh taught the Jedi what he knew about building the weapons, sharing the process of shaping crystals through Force alchemy, the construction of hilts that could channel dark-side energy, and the techniques for creating the frozen energy blades that could cut through nearly anything. Initially, many Jedi rejected the Force Sabers outright due to their reliance on dark emotions. They feared losing balance, becoming like the Rakata they fought against. The weapons represented everything the Jedi had been taught to avoid. Still, as Skagora fell and the Rakata attacked other worlds with increasing success, the Council deemed the weapons necessary for survival. Only with Force Sabers could the Jedi stand against overwhelming Rakatan numbers and superior technology. The choice was practical but emotionally crushing. The Jedi also relied heavily on their seers during this period, those who perceived the Force through dreams and visions rather than direct sensing. These seers shared their images and impressions in regular meditation sessions, allowing commanders to interpret where the enemy would strike and coordinate defensive responses. This network of precognition became one of the Jedi's greatest strategic advantages. By the end of the first year of the war, the Jedi had forged a strong alliance with the forces of the Settled Worlds. Rajavary commanded the combined forces from a strategic level, while Locke led the Jedi specifically into battle, coordinating force techniques with conventional military tactics. The system had unified against the common threat. Sub-Praetor Kalet launched the next major assault on the planet Shikakwa, seeking to break the Alliance's morale. Her Flesh Raider soldiers, mutated lower caste Rakata bred specifically as weapons, sought to attack Rio Fortress through the surrounding swamps. Rio Fortress served as General Rajavary's command post for the Tython forces, making it a strategic target. Capturing or destroying it would cripple the Alliance's coordination. The Jedi Seers foresaw the attack through their visions, giving Rajavary time to prepare. The Jedi arranged their forces to ambush the enemy in the swamps where the Flesh Raiders' numbers would be less advantageous. General Dagan Locke led the Jedi forces in the field, personally directing the defensive positions. During the battle, Zesh quickly dispatched hordes of Flesh Raiders with brutal efficiency, his training making him effective against his former allies. When confronted by another Force Hound, Shay Koda flew to his rescue on her Rancor Dragon, the massive beast's aerial advantage proving decisive. Zesh and Locke were forced to flee from the destructive firepower of Rakatan Annihilators, massive walker war machines that could obliterate entire squads with a single shot. Seeing no other option, Locke ordered Jedi Ranger Hawk Rio's Hunter-class starfighter squadrons to airstrike the Annihilators despite the dangerous proximity of Jedi ground forces to the target zone. The attack succeeded, but cost Jedi lives. Upon learning of the successful strike against the Annihilators, Rajavary ordered Temple Masters Tave, Quang and Tem Madog to launch the primary assault. The Jedi overran Kalet's forces in a powerful counterattack. She lost over half her army in the rout and was permitted by Skalnas to withdraw her surviving troops back to Skagora, though she was furious at the defeat. In the battle's aftermath, the Jedi left no Rakatan survivors, executing prisoners who attempted to surrender. Seknos Wrath was disgusted by Locke's victory speech and the Order's willingness to embrace pure aggression without restraint. The line between defender and aggressor was beginning to blur. On Skagora, Kalet openly challenged Skalnas' authority before the other commanders, blaming his strategy for the defeat. Skalnas responded by explaining to her privately his true goal, taking the Infinity Gate on Tython to elevate himself to supreme power over the entire Infinite Empire. Then, to ensure her silence and reassert his dominance, he killed her with Force Lightning before she could react. The other Sub-Praetors received the message clearly. What the Jedi did not realize was that Skalnas' true plan was far more elaborate than they suspected. Following the victory at Shikakwa, Zesh proposed a bold plan to end the Rakatan invasion: assassinate Praetor Skalnas. Without their charismatic and powerful leader, the Rakatan Sub-Praetors would fight among themselves for control, causing their military campaign to collapse into factional warfare. It was a strategy the Rakatan themselves had used countless times against other species. Using his Force Hound training and residual connection to Rakatan command networks, Zesh located Skalnas' base on Skagora. The Jedi mounted an all-or-nothing assault to reclaim the planet and kill the Praetor, committing their best warriors and most powerful masters to the operation. They walked directly into a trap. Skalnas had been expecting them all along. Unbeknownst to the assault force, Trill had informed Skalnas of their plan days before it was executed, giving him time to prepare a counter-trap. Skalnas not only allowed the attack to proceed, but actively encouraged it, positioning his forces to capture rather than kill the Jedi leadership. Back on Tython, Seer Tasha Rio had a vision of the Jedi walking into an ambush. She desperately tried to warn them, but communication delays and the chaos of battle meant her message arrived too late. On Skagora, Locke also realized it was a trap as the attack unfolded, telling Seknos Wrath to take command and withdraw. General Rajavary ordered the strike team to pull out immediately, but the order came too late to save everyone. Rakatan forces ambushed the Jedi using underground tunnels to surround them from multiple directions. Many Jedi were captured in the fighting, including Dagan Lok and Seknos Wrath. The prisoners were placed in glass tubes beneath the Rakatan fortress, where their Force-sensitive suffering was harvested to power Rakatan war machines. The process was agonizing and degrading, designed to break their spirits as well as fuel the invasion. Meanwhile, Shae Koda fought alongside Master Quan Jang against the Rakatan forces, trying to cover the retreat. When Koda attacked a Force Hound with lightning in her fury, Quan Jang warned her not to lose balance, even in this desperate situation. The irony of his words, spoken while fighting for survival, was not lost on either of them. Zesh found Trill during the battle, but did not recognize her despite their shared training. His memory blocks remained intact, preventing him from seeing the truth. Trill led him deeper into the Rakatan base with false promises of freeing prisoners, bringing him to where the captured Jedi were being held. There, she revealed her betrayal with a cruel smile and stunned Zesh with Force lightning before he could react. Skull Nas used a Rakatan device to restore Zesh's full memory, removing each mental block one by one. The truth hit him in crushing waves. He had originally found Tython for Skull Nas using his tracking abilities. He had been sent as a spy among the Jedi, programmed to report back without even knowing it. He had sabotaged the Devourer on Skull Nas's orders, killing his own Praetor. Everything he had shared with the Jedi, Skull Nas now knew. Rakatan tactics and weaknesses, defensive positions, strategic plans, and military methods had all been reported through Zesh's unwitting betrayal. He had betrayed the people who had shown him compassion, and he had not even known he was doing it. Initially, Zesh refused to return to slavery despite the weight of his guilt, but the restoration of his Rakatan conditioning combined with the crushing realization of what he had done drove him back into service as a Force Hound. Broken and despairing, he told Skull Nas about the Jedi Seers and their strategic importance. He confirmed Dagan Lok's vision of the Infinity Gate in the chasm beneath Anil Kesh, giving Skull Nas the final piece of information he needed. While the Jedi forces struggled to escape the trap on Ska Gora, the Seers on Tython had another vision. They saw that the Rakata would next attack Anil Kesh, the Temple of Science. They had prepared to send a warning to Rajvari and coordinate defenses. Before they could warn anyone, their vision was cut short. Zesh, once again a Force Hound operating under Skull Nas's control, reached out through the Force and used dark-side power to blind them. The connection he had formed with Tasha Rio during this time on Tython became a weapon, allowing him to strike at the Seers remotely. Tasha was struck particularly hard by the attack. She was blinded both physically and in the Force, her eyes burned by the dark energy, and her ability to see the future destroyed. The mental shock crippled the Jedi's ability to predict Rakatan movements, eliminating their greatest advantage at the worst possible moment. Back on Ska Gora, Rajvari ordered the captured strike force to retreat and regroup, but many did not escape the Rakatan pursuit. The assault had been a disaster on every level. Skull Nas began the Second Battle of Tython by first destroying a Jedi strike force that had hidden on Tython's moon, Ashla, waiting to provide support. The surprise attack destroyed the defenders, who never saw it coming without the Seers' warnings. Without their ability to see the future, the Jedi were fighting without guidance. In space above Tython, Rangers Rory Fenn and Hawk Rio fought the Rakata in their starfighters, struggling to slow the invasion fleet. The enemy's overwhelming numbers threatened to break through despite their superior piloting. On the surface, Skull Nas ordered Trill to lead the ground assault on Anil Kesh, while keeping Zesh at his side for the descent into the chasm. The Jedi fought fiercely against Trill's forces at the Temple of Science. Shae Koda, sensing Zesh through their Force connection, abandoned her defensive position to confront him. Meanwhile, Skull Nas descended into the chasm with both Zesh and the captive Dagan Lok, seeking the Infinity Gate that would make him invincible. Deep in the chasm, Skull Nas revealed that the Infinity Gate hidden at the bottom was no ordinary gate. It was a Prime Gate, the original template from which all other Infinity Gates had been created. It required no matching gate to function, meaning its user could travel anywhere in the galaxy instantly. With such technology, no world could hide, no defense could hold. On Ska Gora, Seknos' wrath had reached his breaking point. He gathered all his pain, rage, and hate from the days of torture and humiliation. He drew deeply on the dark side and shattered his prison tube. Afterward, he freed other captured Force sensitives who had been powering Rakatan ships. Together, they killed their guards and joined the battle above. Seknos sought revenge against Zesh for the betrayal, not yet understanding the full truth. The freed slaves turned the tide on Ska Gora, overwhelming their captors through sheer desperation and rage. However, their victory came at great cost to their own balance in the Force. They had become what they fought against. At Anil Kesh, the blinded Tasha Rio meditated with her mentor Turs Senden on the holocron of Anang, seeking guidance from the ancient Kwa. The Kwa gatekeeper appeared and told her it was time for Tython to awaken. The Rakatan attack had triggered a failsafe built into the holocron thousands of years ago as a final defense against the Infinite Empire's return. Anang explained that the Tho-Yor could be weaponized, transformed from vessels of peace into instruments of defense. But activation required a Jedi seer who could bridge the connection between the ancient ships and Tython. Though Tasha was blinded by the Force by Zesh's attack, Anang said she could be reconnected through Tho-Yor's power. Unfortunately, the reconnection would cost her her life, but it would save everyone else. Tasha realized immediately what was being asked of her. Turs Senden desperately hoped to find another way, searching for alternatives that might not require such a sacrifice. Tasha quietly shared his fears with a touch, telling him she would miss him. Before he could stop her, she leaped into the exploration beam at Anil Kesh's core. The Force energy that surged through her body restored what Zesh's attack had taken. Her sight returned, and her connection to the Force reconnected. As she merged with the Tho-Yor, she understood their purpose. They were not just vessels, but guardians waiting for this moment. Her physical form dissolved, and the ancient ships awakened. All 9 Tho-Yor across Tython awakened at once with bright orange energy. At Anil Kesh, Turs Senden ordered the immediate evacuation as the temple began to tear apart from the massive power flowing through it. The structure that had stood for ages shook violently as the Tho-Yor prepared to fulfill their ancient purpose. In the chasm far below, Skalnas activated the Prime Gate, confident in his coming victory. Locke and Shay Koda had followed them into the depths, determined to stop him. Locke engaged Skalnas in combat, while Shay confronted Zesh, trying to reach the person beneath the weapon. Zesh urged Shay to surrender and save herself, but she refused. Instead, she offered him something he had never received from the Rakata: forgiveness without conditions. Skalnas attacked Shay with Force lightning, mocking her and calling love a weakness. Watching Shay suffer, yet hearing her continued forgiveness, shattered the conditioning that had defined Zesh's life. He turned on his former master and attacked. They fought as the chasm shook around them from both the Prime Gate's activation and the Tho-Yor's awakening above. Above ground, the awakened Tho-Yor fired massive beams of orange energy into space. The dozens destroyed Rakatan ships, their shields and armor useless against weapons designed by the ancient Kwa. The beam from Anil Kesh's Tho-Yor fired down through the temple's remains into the chasm below, striking the Prime Gate and destroying it in a massive explosion. As the gate exploded, Zesh drove his Force saber through Skalnas' chest. The Praetor's body fell into the collapsing gate and burned to ash in seconds. Zesh declared his true name, Tau, reclaiming his identity and his freedom from Rakatan slavery. Shay, injured but alive, told Tau that Locke had survived. The three barely escaped the chasm as explosions tore through it. Behind them, the abyss of Ruse sealed itself, burying the Prime Gate's remains forever. Soon, the Rakatan forces felt Skalnas' death through the Force. Without their Praetor holding them together, the sub-praetors immediately turned on each other in panic. Ancient rivalries erupted into open conflict, and the command structure collapsed within hours. The Thoyor continued their assault, destroying what remained of the Rakatan fleet. Their ancient weapons overwhelmed even the Infinite Empire's technology. Ships that survived the Thoyor's assault were finished off by the Settled World's fleet, which had been waiting in reserve. The surviving Rakata fled the Tython system in complete disorder, abandoning their bases and leaving their ground forces behind. Over the following weeks, Rakatan forces still on the surface were hunted down. The invasion was over, ended by ancient technology awakened through sacrifice. The blast from the Thoyor had destroyed Anil Kesh's upper floors and central exploration cannon, leaving the once proud temple a shattered ruin. The temple's support legs held, leaving a battered structure that marked the cost of victory. In the ruins, Temple Master Ketu joined Rajavari and Dagon Lok to survey the damage and discuss the future of the Jedi Order. During their discussion, Lok told the Masters that he and his followers would continue using Force-sabers despite the concerns about their philosophy. Dangers remained, he argued. Flesh Raiders had escaped into Tython's wilderness during the chaos, and other threats might emerge. The weapons had turned out to be too effective to abandon. The Masters warned that Lok could be sent back to Bogan for choosing power over balance. Lok replied with quiet certainty that he would never return to that moon. The cost extended far beyond the ruined temple. Tython's surface carried scars that would take decades to heal. Force-sensitive sites had been corrupted by dark side energy from long combat. Thousands of Jedi had died defending their homeworld, and thousands more civilians had died in the fighting. Entire settlements had been destroyed, natural systems damaged, and sacred places ruined. More troubling than the physical destruction was how the war had changed the Jedi themselves. They had captured large amounts of Rakatan technology, including Force-saber building methods and dark side force techniques. Many Jedi had seen how effective pure aggression was in combat compared to maintaining balance. Throughout the Order, questions arose about whether balance was truly practical when facing threats to their survival. Some Jedi had accepted the dark side during the war, drawing on rage, hate, and fear to survive. They had won and protected everything they held dear. These unsolved problems, combined with dark side techniques from captured Rakatan records and the widespread use of Force-sabers, would drive the split that erupted into civil war roughly a decade later. As the Order struggled with these questions, Shea Koda and Tau walked away from the celebrations. They headed into the silent desert, seeking peace after the horrors of war. Yet peace would not last. The Rakatan invasion had left deeper scars than shattered temples and ruined landscapes. It had planted a dangerous idea in the minds of those who had survived. Jedi like Dagon Lok and his followers had tasted the power of using dark-side fury without limits. They had won battles by abandoning balance for aggression. They had survived by fully embracing Bogan while their more careful brothers and sisters fell. Some began to question whether 10,000 years of balanced philosophy had been wrong. If unlimited power could defeat enemies when balance could not, what did that say about the Jedi way? The Force-sabers they had built still hummed with dark energy, calling to those who used them. The Rakatan techniques they had captured promised even greater strength for those willing to study them. Within a decade, these doubts would explode into open rebellion. The Force Wars weren't supposed to happen. For over 10,000 years, the Jedi Order had maintained balance on Tython, walking the line between light and dark with careful discipline. Within a decade of surviving the Rakatan invasion, the Order tore itself apart in a civil war that would force the survivors to abandon their homeworld forever. The philosophy that had sustained the Jedi for many generations contained a fatal weakness. Perfect balance between Ashla and Bogan required every Jedi to study both light and dark equally. This created an opening for corruption that recent wars had only widened. Records from this time are broken and scattered. pieced together by historians over countless years. What follows represents the best understanding scholars have reached, though much remains unknown. As one Jedi archivist noted long after, history from before the Republic proved incredibly ancient and extremely difficult to research. Arguments within the Jedi Order started slowly, then spread with terrible speed. On Tython, an order of philosophers and researchers who had spent lifetimes studying the Force found themselves split over a basic question: how should this mysterious energy be used? A growing group began arguing for something different. Some Jedi, especially those who had fought in recent wars, questioned whether balance truly helped the Order. They had watched enemies win through pure aggression, while Jedi held themselves back with rules about balance. They had seen their brothers and sisters die because they paused, trying to keep their emotions in check when survival demanded quick action. These rebels didn't reject balance entirely at first. Instead, they pushed for a new way of thinking, claiming that real strength came from fully using one side of the Force rather than splitting attention between opposing ideas. The dark side, they argued, offered power that balance-focused training could never match. The Jedi Council tried to fix these problems through traditional means: meditation, discussion, and appeals to 10,000 years of wisdom. Council members pointed out that every previous attempt to use one extreme had ended in corruption and pain. Balance wasn't just philosophy, it was a survival method, the only reliable way to use the Force without being destroyed by it. Around 25,783 BBY, roughly 10 years after the Rakatan invasion, disagreements turned into open war. The conflict that swept across Tython became known as the Force Wars. This wasn't Jedi fighting outside enemies. This was Jedi fighting Jedi, with both sides using the full power of the Force. According to the broken records that survive, a group made up of those who followed a more aggressive path came into direct conflict with the Jedi, who kept traditional balance philosophy. The details of how violence began remain unclear, lost to time and the destruction that followed. Once the fighting started, it consumed Tython completely. The Force Wars were different from previous conflicts the Jedi had faced. The Despot War had been costly, but limited to certain areas. The Rakatan invasion had been fierce, but quick, ended by the Rakata's own collapse. The Force Wars dragged on for years, touching every corner of Tython and poisoning Force-sensitive sites across the planet. Masters who had trained together, studied together, and fought side by side against outside threats now found themselves on opposite sides of a gap that couldn't be crossed. The temples that had served as centers of learning and meditation became battlefields. The philosophical traditions that had guided Jedi were tested to destruction. Several Jedi emerged as leaders during this crisis and would become famous as founders of what came after. Master Garen Jard, who would later be remembered for his belief in peace and protection, fought to defend traditional Jedi philosophy. Master Kala Bryn, who championed justice and reason, worked to preserve what could be saved of Jedi wisdom. Master Turs Sendon, keeper of histories and guardian of knowledge, made sure that records of these terrible events survived for future generations to study. Master Rajavari, whose name would later be tied to both founding and betrayal, stood out during the Force Wars as a defender of the Order. His real test would come later, after peace had supposedly returned. The Force Wars left Tython nearly impossible to live on. The planet that had enforced balance through natural consequences for 10,000 years could no longer do that job. Years of violence in Force-sensitive locations had released too much dark side energy. The winning side consisted of those who had followed what sources describe as a more peaceful path. They looked at their poisoned homeworld and realized a terrible truth. They could rebuild the physical structures and restore settlements given time and resources. However, they couldn't restore Tython's force balance. The planet's ability to enforce balance had been destroyed by the very conflict it had been designed to prevent. The decision reached by the surviving Jedi Masters was revolutionary. They would abandon not just Tython, but the entire balance philosophy that had defined the Order for over 10,000 years. This wasn't a decision made quickly or easily. The Masters spent months in meditation and discussion, exploring every possible alternative. Some argued for keeping the balance philosophy while simply enforcing it more strictly. Others suggested finding a new world with similar force properties to Tython, hoping to recreate what had been lost. A few even proposed returning to Tython after a period of healing, giving the planet time to recover from the Force War's destruction. The new philosophy would be simpler. A group made up of those who followed a more peaceful path left Tython and established itself on the planet of Ossus in the Outer Rim. There, far from the corrupted battlefields of their homeworld, they would rebuild on a new philosophical foundation. Later, this group called itself the Jedi Order. The survivors faced a basic question about what philosophical principles would guide the new order. They kept certain elements from Jedi teaching, recognizing that some principles had stood the test of time. The focus on knowledge over ignorance, a cornerstone of the Jedi Code, was preserved as a core truth. Such knowledge experienced a marked transformation. Where the Jedi had taught that both light and dark were necessary parts of a greater whole, the Jedi concluded that the dark side represented corruption rather than balance. The Force Wars had shown that trying to channel both aspects equally was deeply unstable. Those who embraced darkness inevitably gave in to its corrupting influence. The Jedi began developing new guiding principles focused only on the light side, devoting themselves entirely to compassion, peace, and selfless service. The personal statements that characterized the Jedi Code, with its acceptance of being both the revealing fire of light and the mystery of darkness, gave way to principles that rejected darkness entirely. This philosophical framework would continue evolving over the centuries that followed. The complete development of these principles into a final code would take generations of careful thought and practice. In 25,783 BBY, the departure from Tython marked the end of an era. The remaining Jedi gathered their important texts and artifacts, loading them aboard ships for the journey to Ossus. The leaving took weeks as survivors salvaged what they could from damaged temples, making sure that 10,000 years of built-up knowledge wouldn't be lost entirely. Ossus had been chosen carefully. Unlike Tython, which enforced balance through dangerous natural consequences, Ossus offered a strong light side force presence without the deadly split nature that had marked their former home. The planet bloomed with green forests and gentle rivers. The early Jedi established themselves on Ossus with clear intent to avoid repeating Jedi mistakes. They built modest temples, focused on usefulness rather than impressiveness. They created training facilities designed for their new light side-only philosophy. At their new home, the Jedi refined a code that would guide them. They became a monk-like warrior people, devoting themselves to the pursuit of peace and knowledge rather than personal power. Masters Garen Jard, Kala Bryn, and Tur Sendin became known as founding Jedi Masters, each representing different parts of what the new order would become. Master Rajavari also stood among these founders, one of the first members of the Jedi High Council that met on Tython during the Order's earliest days. He helped establish the Jedi's philosophical framework and trained the first generation of what he called Jedi lore keepers, scholars dedicated to preserving knowledge. Rajavari even secretly established what he called the Fount of Rajavari, an early version of the Jedi archives where knowledge could be preserved and studied. In the wake of the Force Wars, the Jedi had a new understanding of the Force. They saw that the Force, while naturally light, could be used for corrupt ends. Those who did not respect its power risked falling to the dark side, a fate they had witnessed firsthand among their fallen Jedi brothers and sisters. The organized study of dark side techniques was forbidden. Jedi would learn to recognize dark side signs and defend against them. but they would never channel dark side energy themselves. Tython itself was not forgotten, but it was sealed away. The Jedi Council declared it a forbidden world. Its location was kept secret from all but the highest masters. This wasn't punishment, but quarantine. Tython's ruins served as a permanent reminder of what happened when Force users lost their way, even in pursuit of what they believed was a proper understanding of the Force. This arrangement would endure for generations. Some Jedi would later return to study Tython's ruins, seeking to understand the Force Wars and learn from the mistakes of their predecessors. The planet would never again serve as the Order's home. Where the Jedi had walked the line between light and dark, the Jedi would follow a different path, committing themselves entirely to the light and abandoning the balance that had proven impossible to maintain. But even among the founders, one master would question whether abandoning balance was truly wisdom or simply fear. In 25,783 BBY, the Jedi who had established themselves on Ossus carried more than salvaged texts and ancient artifacts. They brought a mission forged in Civil War's ashes to make sure Force users would never again threaten galactic peace through unchecked ambition. Building a new order from the ruins of the old world would be nearly as hard as surviving the Force Wars themselves. The early temples on Ossus reflected the Jedi's new priorities. Simple stone buildings housed meditation halls and training grounds, built for usefulness rather than impressiveness. The Jedi had learned that grand buildings mattered less than the teachings happening within those walls. They built practical facilities that served their purpose without demanding too many resources or labor. The Jedi didn't put everything in one location as the Jedi had done on Tython. They established several facilities across Ossus, each serving different jobs. Training schools housed younglings receiving initial instruction before advancing to specialized study. Research facilities allowed masters to explore Force events under controlled conditions. Meditation retreats provided isolation for Jedi seeking deeper understanding through contemplation. The founding masters oversaw this expansion while refining what would become Jedi teaching. Even in these early years, cracks began appearing in the foundation they were building. Rajavari, despite his contributions to establishing the Jedi Order, harbored doubts about the new restrictions on Force study. He had helped create the light side-only philosophy, but he increasingly questioned whether it was actually better than the Jedi balance or simply a reaction born from fear of repeating past mistakes. At some point during these early centuries, Master Rajavari fell to the dark side. The details of his corruption remain unclear, lost to time, and deliberately hidden by later Jedi who found the story of a founder's fall too painful to preserve in detail. Rajavari eventually rejected the order he had helped establish and attempted to destroy it from within. He established a base in the ancient ruins of Kaleth, a Force-sensitive site that had survived from Tython's Jedi era. There, Rajavari gathered followers, other Jedi who shared his doubts about the Order's direction and were willing to accept forbidden knowledge in pursuit of greater power. His teachings directly contradicted core Jedi principles, including ideas about mercy, sacrifice, and the proper relationship between strength and wisdom. The Jedi Council was forced to attack Rajavari's fortress at Kaleth, fighting former brothers and sisters who had chosen to follow the Rogue Master. The attack ended with Rajavari's defeat, but the mental impact on the Order was deep. Rajavari's fall showed that rejecting balance was not enough to prevent corruption. Despite this early crisis, the Jedi survived. The Order's foundations held. The survivors used Rajavari's fall as a teaching tool rather than a reason to abandon their mission. The Jedi Order didn't emerge fully formed from leaving Tython. The shift from Jedi balance philosophy to Jedi light side commitment took centuries of improvement, discussion, and practical testing. Generations of masters contributed to developing what would later become acknowledged across the galaxy as Jedi teaching and tradition. From roughly 25,783 BBY to 25,053 BBY, during these early centuries when the Republic was founded, the Jedi remained mostly isolated on Ossus. They focused on internal development rather than galactic involvement, refining their philosophy and training methods while occasionally traveling to nearby worlds to assist populations in need. This period saw the development of what would become core Jedi practices. The tradition of taking Padawan learners, adapted from Jedi master-apprentice relationships, was made official with clear expectations and goals. The concept of Jedi trials emerged from these early years as masters sought ways to ensure complete training before granting independence. These tests would show a Padawan's readiness to become a full knight. The relationship between meditation and force ability received special attention. The Jedi had practiced meditation as a tool for keeping balance, clearing the mind to sense both light and dark sides of the Force equally. The Jedi adapted this practice to focus specifically on connecting with the light side, using meditation to deepen their understanding of compassion, peace, and selfless service. Combat training went through major changes. The Jedi had trained warriors who could channel both calm and aggression as situations demanded, drawing on whichever side of the Force best suited the moment. The Jedi, committed to light-side-only philosophy, had to develop combat methods that didn't rely on channeling emotion and aggression. This led to defensive styles, stressing protection and control rather than overwhelming attack. Throughout these centuries, the Jedi stayed away from power struggles and politics that might compromise their mission. Ossus sat far from the core worlds, where human civilization was slowly forming into larger governments. This isolation let the Jedi develop their identity without the outside pressure or interference. However, isolation couldn't last forever. The galaxy beyond Ossus was changing in ways that would soon draw the Jedi into the wider galactic community. Around 25,053 BBY, joined by trade and renewed communication channels, the core worlds signed an agreement and united as the First Galactic Republic. This wasn't a conquest or a political revolution, but rather natural growth. Hundreds of worlds recognized they had common interests and shared challenges that required coordinated responses. The Republic's founding represented humanity's largest political achievement since the Rakatan Empire's fall. Unlike the Rakata, who had kept their empire through military force and slave labor, the Republic was built on democratic principles, voluntary cooperation. Member worlds kept control over internal affairs while giving certain powers to a central government responsible for managing trade, settling disputes, and coordinating defense against outside threats. The newborn Republic began exploration of hyperspace routes in earnest, supported by daring Duros scouts, whose species had pioneered much of the galaxy's early exploration. These scouts gradually established what became known as major trade routes, stable hyperspace lanes connecting key worlds throughout the core and later extending into the Inner Rim and beyond. One of these routes, the Perlemian trade route, would eventually connect Coruscant to many worlds across Northern Galaxy. Coruscant was already emerging as the Republic's political center. As exploration extended farther from the core, Republic scouts discovered that the route could potentially extend all the way to the Outer Rim, opening vast new regions to settlement and trade. The Perlemian trade route's extension into the Outer Rim brought Republic scouts to Ossus, where the Jedi Order's home had been established centuries before. The meeting between Republic explorers and the Jedi was peaceful, marked by curiosity and interest on both sides. The Jedi welcomed the scouts, intrigued by news of a vast democratic alliance uniting hundreds of core worlds under common governance. For the Republic scouts, discovering Force users on a remote Outer Rim world raised fascinating questions. Ancient legends from old Republic stories mentioned warriors with seemingly magical powers, and some cultures preserved stories of the Jedi, though most dismissed these as myths stretched beyond recognition. Finding an actual order of beings who could manipulate reality through connection to a mysterious energy field confirmed traditions that many had considered purely legendary. The Scouts returned to the core worlds with reports of the Jedi, describing an order of monk-like warriors dedicated to peace and justice. These reports reached the highest levels of government, sparking discussion about what relationship, if any, should be established with these Force users. Some politicians worried about an armed order operating outside the Republic's authority. Others saw potential benefits in allying with beings whose unique abilities might serve Republic interests. The head of the Jedi home at this time was Master Han Tiar, a respected teacher and philosopher who had trained under the founding generation. Tiar pointed out that the Republic's expansion into the Outer Rim would unavoidably bring the Jedi into contact with larger galactic civilizations. The Order could either engage with this new political reality or remain isolated, which might become impossible to maintain as the Republic continued expanding. After consulting with the Jedi Council and meditating on the results, Master Tiar made a decision that would fundamentally alter the Jedi's mission. He returned with the Scouts to the Allied core worlds, traveling to Coruscant to see this Republic firsthand and judge whether it represented a force the Jedi should support. What Han Tiar found on Coruscant impressed him deeply. The Republic was still young and its organization still developing, but the principles it claimed to serve lined up remarkably well with Jedi philosophy. The Republic promised democratic governance, peaceful resolution of disputes through negotiation rather than force, and protection of sentient rights across its member worlds. These weren't just empty words. The Republic's founding documents wrote these principles into fundamental law. Master Tiar foresaw that the young Republic would need protectors. As the Republic expanded, it would unavoidably encounter threats like pirates, slavers, ambitious warlords, and potentially even hostile civilizations. The Republic's democratic principles, while admirable, might become difficult to defend without some force capable of acting decisively in crises while remaining politically neutral. The Jedi could serve that job. They could become the Republic's guardians without becoming its masters. Around 24,953 BBY, after weeks of talks with Republic leaders and consulting with the Jedi Council on Ossus, Master Han Tiar formally pledged the Jedi Order as the Republic's guardians of peace and justice. The ceremony took place on Coruscant before the assembled Senate, with representatives from hundreds of worlds witnessing the historic agreement. The terms reflected careful consideration of both sides' interests. The Republic would provide funding, transportation, and intelligence support for Jedi operations. In return, the Jedi would serve as peacekeepers, mediators, and investigators under Republic authority while keeping their independence. The agreement established that neither side would interfere in the other's internal affairs. The Republic couldn't dictate Jedi teaching or training methods. The Jedi couldn't override Senate decisions or force their philosophy on Republic citizens. This separation allowed both organizations to work together while keeping their distinct identities. The foundations for the modern Republic were laid in that moment. The alliance created a framework that would survive wars, political upheavals, and challenges that would have destroyed weaker partnerships. Both sides benefited. The Republic gained protectors whose commitment couldn't be corrupted. The Jedi gained the resources to carry out their mission across the expanding galaxy. For the first time since leaving Tython, the Jedi would permanently station members away from Ossus. Jedi Knights began traveling Republic space, responding to requests for help from member worlds and investigating threats that local authorities couldn't handle. The Order established rules for how Jedi would operate within Republic territory, creating guidelines that balanced Jedi independence with respect for local laws and customs. Early cooperation proved remarkably successful. Jedi settled territorial disputes between neighboring systems, preventing conflicts that might have grown into violence. They investigated criminal organizations that operated across multiple worlds, tracking threats beyond the reach of any single planetary government. They protected frontier settlements from pirate raids, bringing peace to frontier regions that had known only chaos. The Jedi's reputation grew as word of their abilities spread through Republic space. Their brown robes, later changing to tan, became recognizable symbols of hope and justice. Around 24,500 BBY, the Jedi Republic Alliance was barely 5 centuries old when internal disagreement began bubbling within the Order. The restrictions that had been established after the Force Wars included bans on studying dark-side techniques, stress on emotional control, and commitment to light-side-only philosophy. These limitations rubbed against some Jedi who found them unnecessarily restrictive. A Jedi Knight named Zendor became the focal point of this growing dissatisfaction. A young Kashi Mer who had been trained at the Jedi homes on Ossus, Zendor excelled in combat and had distinguished himself during several missions dealing with pirates and warlords in the Outer Rim. His skill was undeniable, his dedication seemingly unquestionable. Zendor harbored doubts about Jedi teaching. After the Force Wars, when the Jedi Order learned of the destructive power of the dark side, the Jedi devoted themselves to the path of the light. This commitment meant rejecting entire categories of Force knowledge and technique. Zendor increasingly questioned whether this rejection was wisdom or cowardice, whether the Jedi were protecting themselves from corruption or simply hiding from knowledge they feared. He began arguing that understanding the dark side was necessary to combat dark Jedi effectively. How could Jedi defend against techniques they didn't understand? How could they notice corruption in others if they had no knowledge of what corruption looked like? These weren't radical questions. Many Jedi asked themselves similar things. Still, Zendor pushed further than most were willing to go. In the early days of the Republic, as the Jedi Order was still developing its operational procedures and defining its relationship with galactic governance, Zendor defied the Order's code and began experimenting with dark-side techniques. He didn't do so openly or carelessly. Instead, he studied in secret, telling himself he was simply expanding his understanding for practical purposes. The Jedi Council discovered Zendor's activities through reports from concerned masters who had noticed changes in his behavior and manner. Angered by this violation of fundamental Jedi principles, the Council confronted Zendor and demanded that he stop his studies immediately. When he refused and attempted to justify his actions through philosophical arguments, the Council made a decision it hoped would prevent the situation from growing worse. The Jedi Order banished Zendor from Ossus. The Council expected that removing Zendor from the Order would end the threat. They had encountered disagreement before. Rajavari's fall had taught them that even founders could be corrupted. They had developed procedures for dealing with Jedi who strayed from proper teaching. Exile seemed sufficient punishment for someone who had erred but hadn't caused serious harm. What the Council didn't realize was that exile had only made Zendor more dangerous. Zendor, now immensely powerful and full of rage at what he viewed as unjust persecution, didn't accept exile quietly. Instead, he traveled to the moon Leto in the Outer Rim, far beyond effective Republic territory. There, he began establishing something unprecedented, an alternative Force tradition that explicitly rejected the limitations the Jedi had imposed. He called his movement the Legions of Leto, stressing their military character and willingness to use whatever methods worked. Zendor didn't advocate abandoning the light side entirely or accepting pure evil. Rather, he argued for what he considered a practical middle position. He wanted to use dark side techniques when situations demanded them, while keeping overall commitment to justice and protection. This position had surface appeal, especially to Jedi who served in dangerous frontier regions where idealistic principles often clashed with practical needs. Zendor offered freedom from restrictions that sometimes made their jobs harder. He promised power without the corruption that had destroyed previous Force users who had dabbled in darkness. He suggested that the Jedi Council's bans arose from fear rather than wisdom. For months, Zendor secretly recruited dissatisfied Jedi to his cause. He approached knights and even some masters who had expressed frustration with council policies. The moment Zendor's rebellion became public knowledge, both the Republic and the Jedi Council recognized they faced a crisis that could destabilize everything they had built. The Senate couldn't tolerate independent Force user armies operating outside Republic's authority. The Jedi Council knew that allowing this split to continue would undermine the philosophical foundation on which the Order was built. Not since the Force Wars had the Jedi fought their own. Yet less than 500 years after the Jedi-Republic alliance was formed, Jedi would once again ignite their lightsabers against former brothers and sisters who had chosen a different path. The first Great Schism had begun. The conflict between the Jedi Order and Zendor's legions of Leto was brief but dangerous. Unlike the Force Wars, which had dragged on for years, the Leto Wars lasted mere months. The Republic provided military support, bringing resources and organization that the isolated legions couldn't match. Jedi forces led by Master Adrista Pina traveled to Leto with clear orders: crush the rebellion and capture or kill its leaders. Pina was a veteran of numerous conflicts, known for both tactical skill and unwavering commitment to Jedi principles. The battles that followed showed how dangerous Force users were when opposing each other without restraint. Zendor's followers used techniques specifically designed to counter traditional Jedi combat styles. They combined aggressive tactics and dark-side-enhanced attacks with the skill that came from Jedi training and power drawn from emotions the Jedi Code forbade. Over time, discipline and superior numbers gradually wore down the legions. Master Pina's forces systematically isolated Zendor's bases, cutting off supplies and reinforcements. Republic warships blockaded Leto, preventing the legions from receiving support or fleeing. The rebellion's initial advantages couldn't overcome strategic disadvantages and limited resources. The decisive engagement came at the Battle of Columas. Zendor, recognizing the war was turning against him, led his remaining forces in a desperate assault meant to break the blockade. The battle became the largest single engagement of the conflict, with thousands clashing both in space and on Columas's surface. At the height of the fighting, Master Pina confronted Zendor directly. Their duel showcased everything their opposing philosophies represented. Zendor fought with unrestricted aggression, channeling fury and hatred into attacks meant to overwhelm through sheer power. Every strike was fueled by a genuine belief that his cause was just and the Jedi Order had lost its way. In contrast, Pina fought with the calm discipline that defined Jedi combat at its best. She defended patiently, conserving energy and waiting for Zendor to exhaust himself. Where Zendor attacked with passion, Pina responded with precision. Where he sought to dominate through power, she relied on technique refined through decades of practice. The duel lasted hours. Both combatants demonstrated mastery that pushed Force combat to its limits. Zendor's raw power repeatedly broke through Pina's defenses, forcing her to call on reserves of skill she hadn't needed since her own training ended. With her unwavering discipline, Zendor ultimately made the mistake she had been waiting for. Attempting a particularly powerful but risky attack, Zendor overextended his guard for just a moment. Pina exploited the opening with a precise strike that pierced his defenses and dealt a mortal wound. Zendor fell, his vision of a more practical Force tradition dying with him on Columas's dusty plains. Without their leader, the rebellion collapsed rapidly. But the war didn't end with Zendor's death. His lover, Arden Lyn, was a warrior of the Palawan tradition who had joined Zendor's cause and served as his most capable lieutenant. She refused to accept defeat. While other Legion members fled or surrendered after Columas, Arden Lyn gathered the most dedicated followers and retreated to remote systems beyond even the Outer Rim. For weeks, Master Pina hunted Arden Lyn across uncharted space. The pursuit became personal for both combatants. Pina viewed Arden Lyn as the last major threat from Zendor's rebellion. Arden Lyn fought not for ideology, but for revenge. She wanted to make the Jedi pay for taking everything she loved. The final confrontation occurred on Irkalla, a desolate world in deep space. There, pursued to exhaustion and cornered by superior forces, Arden Lyn made her last stand. The duel was brutal and desperate, both combatants fighting with nothing left to lose. Arden Lyn wielded techniques from her Palawan training that Pina had never encountered. She fought with raw emotion, grief over Zendor's death, rage at the Jedi for destroying their dream, despair at the hopelessness of her situation. These emotions fueled her attacks, making her momentarily stronger than pure technique should have allowed. Master Pina was eventually defeated. The details of how Arden Lyn overcame such a renowned Jedi Master remain unclear, but sources indicate she channeled her strongest emotions through some artifact that increased her power beyond normal limits. Master Pina was placed into a strange stasis sustained by the dark side. He was neither fully alive nor truly dead. Victory came at a terrible cost. The power Arden Lyn had drawn upon to defeat Pina consumed her as well. She fell into a deep stasis immediately after the battle, sustained by dark side energy in a state similar to what she had inflicted on her opponent. Both combatants would remain trapped in this unnatural suspended state, frozen monuments to the first Great Schism's final battle. Although this first split within the Jedi was over, it would not be the last. The first Great Schism taught the Jedi Council crucial lessons about managing internal disagreement. They acknowledged that preventing future splits required more than simply enforcing obedience. It demanded addressing legitimate concerns about the Order's restrictions and creating channels through which Jedi could voice doubts without fear of immediate punishment or exile. In the aftermath, the Council established formal procedures for Jedi to raise concerns and propose changes to teaching. These procedures kept ultimate authority with the Council while acknowledging that even well-intentioned restrictions could create frustration. The Council also strengthened oversight of Jedi operating in frontier regions, where isolation and constant danger might lead to philosophical drift. The split showed that the light side-only philosophy couldn't eliminate the appeal of forbidden knowledge. There would always be Jedi who questioned restrictions, who wondered whether understanding darkness was necessary to combat it effectively. The Jedi's solution was to make their training even more thorough. If Jedi were going to resist the temptation to study dark side techniques, they needed to understand not just what was forbidden, but why those bans existed. The Council began stressing the history of Force users who had fallen to corruption, using examples like Zendor and Rajavari to show what happened when individuals tried to dabble in darkness. The galaxy remembered the first Great Schism differently depending on perspective. To the Republic, it showed that the Jedi Order could police itself and eliminate internal threats before they endangered galactic stability. This reassured senators who had worried about granting so much authority to an organization of Force users. To the Jedi themselves, the split served as a sobering reminder that their struggle against the dark side was eternal. In just 500 years after abandoning Tython, they had already faced internal rebellion from Jedi who had found their principles too restrictive. The pattern would repeat throughout Jedi history. The names would change. Zendor would give way to future rebels. Still, the tension would persist, the conflict between necessary restriction and practical effectiveness. Despite the trauma, the centuries following Zendor's defeat represented a golden age for the Jedi Republic alliance. With the threat crushed and lessons learned, the Order settled into its role as the Republic's guardians with renewed confidence. Jedi traveled throughout Republic space, bringing justice to worlds that had known only chaos. They settled disputes between neighboring systems, preventing conflicts before they could grow into violence. They investigated criminal organizations that operated across multiple worlds. They protected frontier settlements from pirates and slavers, extending Republic law into regions where it had previously existed only in theory. The Order's reputation grew with each successful mission. Stories spread of Jedi arriving on desperate worlds and solving problems that seemed impossible to fix. Politicians learned to trust Jedi as neutral arbitrators. Criminals learned to fear the brown-robed figures whose determination to see justice done couldn't be stopped. Meanwhile, on Ossus, the Jedi continued refining their teaching. The archives grew as Jedi recorded their experiences and discoveries. The training programs evolved based on lessons learned from actual missions rather than just theory. The Order became increasingly professional, developing skills not just in Force use, but in diplomacy, investigation, and countless practical abilities needed to serve as galactic peacekeepers. At the same time, the Republic expanded steadily outward from the core, incorporating new worlds and establishing new trade routes. Each expansion brought fresh challenges, cultural differences between species, disputes over resources, and conflicts between competing governments. The Jedi were there to help settle these challenges before they exploded into violence. The Golden Age would last for millennia, yet the seeds planted during the First Great Schism never entirely disappeared. Questions about whether lightside restrictions truly served the Order's interests remained. Doubts about whether understanding darkness was necessary to combat it lay dormant, waiting for the right conditions to sprout again. Those conditions would arise long after. Another group of Jedi would conclude that the Order's restrictions prevented them from achieving their true potential. When that next great split came, it would dwarf Xendor's rebellion in scale and consequences. For now, the Jedi had won. They had survived the Force Wars, rebuilt on Ossus, allied with the Republic, and crushed internal rebellion. The foundations laid during these early millennia would support the Order through countless future crises. Centuries later, a Jedi Master would discover forbidden knowledge that would birth an empire sworn to destroy everything the Order had built. For nearly 17,000 years following Xendor's defeat, the Jedi Order flourished. The alliance with the Republic strengthened, and the Jedi expanded across the galaxy as guardians of peace and justice. During the Great Manifest period, the Republic opened new hyperlanes and connected distant worlds. The Jedi served as explorers and protectors, their reputation growing with each peaceful resolution. Generations trained on Ossus, refining their philosophy and building a legacy of service. Still, the questions that had sparked the First Great Schism never truly disappeared. Around 7000 BBY, those questions returned with new urgency. A Jedi Master named Ajunta Pall began studying texts that most Jedi avoided. The archives on Ossus contained salvaged materials from Tython, including some that described techniques the Order had forbidden. The Jedi Council kept these texts because understanding historical conflicts required knowing what had gone wrong. They assumed any Jedi studying them would do so from a purely academic perspective, treating the knowledge as a historical record rather than practical instruction. Paul approached these texts differently. Rather than simply reading about forbidden techniques, he practiced them in private, testing whether channeling emotions like anger or hatred could actually increase force power. What he discovered both excited and deceived him. The power came easily, far more easily than the careful discipline required for light side abilities. This should have warned him that something was wrong, but instead, Paul saw it as proof that these methods were more natural and therefore superior. For years, Paul maintained his reputation as a skilled and dedicated master while secretly expanding his experiments. He carefully selected a few trusted students to share his discoveries with, including an apprentice named Sorzus Sin, who showed exceptional talent for the forbidden arts. Together, they delved deeper into knowledge the Jedi had spent centuries trying to bury. They told themselves they were simply expanding their understanding for practical purposes. It was a comfortable lie that allowed them to continue down a path they knew would lead them to darkness. Soon, Paul and Sorzus Sin could no longer hide their studies. Rather than continuing to work in secret, They openly defied the Jedi Council, declaring publicly that they had been wrong to reject half the Force's power. In their view, the Jedi Code weakened Force users by forbidding access to their full potential, creating guardians who were unnecessarily limited in their abilities. The Council's response was immediate and decisive. They expelled Paul and his followers from the Order, cutting them off from the community they had once served. This response only strengthened Paul's conviction that the Jedi were too rigid and fearful to accept the truth. Since the Council allowed them to keep their forbidden knowledge rather than destroying it, Paul and his followers began recruiting allies from among Jedi who shared doubts about the Order's restrictions. Paul's message proved seductive in its simplicity. Those strong enough to embrace the full range of Force abilities without being corrupted deserved to rule, while those too weak to handle such power deserved to serve or be eliminated. The conflict that became known as the 100-Year Darkness began gradually and escalated over the years into full galactic war. The exiled group didn't immediately attack the Republic or Jedi Order. Instead, they spent the first years building strength in secret, establishing hidden bases in the unknown regions and uncharted areas of the Outer Rim where Republic patrols rarely ventured. During this preparatory phase, Paul's followers developed weapons and techniques specifically designed to counter Jedi defenses, studying everything they knew about how the Order fought and trained. Among these fallen Jedi, Sorza Sin was a brilliant but twisted experimenter. She pioneered the use of alchemy to create war beasts, living beings fundamentally transformed through manipulation of their life essence. The Leviathans she created were massive serpentine creatures designed to tear down fortifications and serve as living siege weapons. Chrysalides were creatures perfected through repeated experiments, each generation more deadly than the last. Many of Sin's creations had been twisted so far from their original forms that they barely resembled living beings anymore, existing in constant agony that fueled their rage in battle. What made Sin's work particularly horrifying was how she had corrupted the healing arts she learned as a Jedi. This made her creations especially deadly to Jedi who encountered them, as they represented good knowledge deliberately applied toward evil ends. When the war finally erupted, it struck across multiple fronts at once. The attackers understood that the Jedi and Republic were stronger when fighting unified against a single threat. By attacking dozens of systems at once, they forced their enemies to divide forces and fight scattered defensive actions rather than mounting coordinated offensives. Several planets in the Mid and Outer Rim fell during the initial assault, with forward bases threatening Republic trade routes and cutting off supply lines to frontier worlds. The attackers even launched a daring raid on Ossus itself, striking at the very heart of Jedi power. Though they couldn't hold the planet against concentrated Jedi defenders, the raid accomplished its real purpose. They stole ancient texts from the Great Library, expanding their understanding of the dark side beyond what they had already learned. The war that followed raged for over a century, with neither side able to achieve decisive victory. Those fighting for the dark side used any tactic, no matter how cruel or destructive, to gain advantage. They destroyed entire settlements to deny resources to Republic forces. They enslaved populations to provide labor for their war machine. They conducted horrific experiments on prisoners, seeking to understand how Force users could be corrupted or stripped of their abilities entirely. As the conflict dragged on, the Jedi and Republic fought back with growing desperation. The Jedi High Council emphasized this as an existential threat and organized defenses while coordinating closely with Republic military forces. Meanwhile, the Republic was economically drained after a century of war spending. Resources from hundreds of worlds had been drained to fund the military, and it would take centuries for the economy to fully recover. Around 6900 BBY, the turning point came when Jedi forces finally cornered the enemy at Korbos. The mining world had become their main base in known space. Years of work had turned natural caves and tunnels into a massive fortress that made it their strongest position. Taking Korbos would be costly but necessary, since they could keep launching attacks as long as they held this base in Republic territory. The Jedi gathered a huge force for the assault, bringing masters and knights from across the galaxy for what everyone knew would be the final battle. Pulling so many Jedi together left other areas unprotected, but the Council decided that winning at Korbos was worth the risk. The battle raged for weeks. Every step forward was deadly against the combination of natural caves and built defenses. Jedi Masters led attack after attack while facing constant strikes from war beasts and enemy powers. The fighting was brutal and close, the kind of grinding battle that helped defenders who knew the ground. Sin's twisted creatures attacked without mercy, forcing Jedi to kill beings that had once been thinking and feeling. The climactic moment came when Jedi forces finally breached the main fortress where Ajunta Pall commanded his followers. The Dark Jedi leader fought with such power that several opponents had to face him at once. His technique was perfect after decades of practice, enhanced by abilities that let him fight far beyond normal limits. He used techniques the Jedi had forgotten or never known, throwing force lightning while reading his enemies' moves before they struck. His raw power kept breaking through defenses that should have stopped any single fighter. But the Jedi had one advantage Paul didn't expect. They coordinated their assault perfectly, fighting as a unit rather than as individuals. Where Paul relied on his own strength, the Jedi covered each other's weaknesses and worked together seamlessly. When one attacked, others defended. This teamwork became the key to victory. The battle dragged on for hours until exhaustion finally caught up with both sides. Even the Force couldn't keep them going forever. At last, Paul made a mistake. He tried an ambitious strike that would have killed two opponents at once, leaving himself exposed for just a fraction of a second. That was all the Jedi needed. A master struck him down with a precise blow, ending both the duel and the life of the war's deadliest fighter. Records show that Ajunta Pall had personally killed more than a dozen Jedi during the Battle of Korbos before he was finally defeated. A Jedi Master struck him down with a severe wound that ended the duel. His defeat marked the turning point of the entire war. Watching their seemingly invincible leader fall shattered his followers' will to keep fighting. By the battle's end, the enemy army was shattered beyond recovery. Many leaders lay dead, their bodies scattered across Korbos' mining tunnels and defenses. Some survivors managed to flee in different directions, hiding in remote systems or disappearing into unexplored space where they hoped to rebuild. The cost of victory was staggering. Thousands of Jedi had died during the 100-Year Darkness, representing multiple generations of knights and masters. Their wisdom and experience were lost forever. The Great Library on Ossus would later add memorial sections for those who had fallen, preserving their names for future generations. Rather than execute the surviving leaders for high treason, the Jedi made a controversial choice that would haunt the galaxy for millennia. The Jedi couldn't bring themselves to kill their former brothers and sisters directly, despite the thousands who had died because of them. At lightsaber point, they marched the defeated prisoners onto a ship bound for uncharted space far beyond Republic borders. They chose symbolic removal instead, purging all records and evidence of the rebels' existence from official histories in an attempt to prevent future generations from following the same path. 12 leaders were exiled together under armed guard. High General Ajunta Pall commanded this group, despite his injuries from Korbos, still named as their leader even in defeat. Sorza Sin, whose creations had killed thousands of Republic soldiers and Jedi alike, was among them. So were other commanders whose names had once been spoken with respect. Marchioness Zozan, Baron Drapa, who had led the Black Legions, and Admiral Karnus Moore. 7 others whose names had been lost to history completed the group of exiles. The Exiles had their weapons taken away, but were allowed to keep basic navigation tools, giving them at least some chance to survive. They left behind some of their war beasts, including leviathans that would be found on Korbos thousands of years later, still lurking in the old mining tunnels. Their ship carried them into unexplored parts of the Outer Rim, guided only by rumors about Force-sensitive species that might exist beyond known space. For weeks, the ship drifted through uncharted territory with no clear destination. The Exiles had only vague clues about a world strong in the dark side, old legends they had heard in their forbidden studies. Many thought they wouldn't survive the journey. Without weapons or enough supplies, lost beyond Republic space, death seemed more likely than finding any safe place. Then, their ship came out of hyperspace near a world that called to them through the Force. The planet's red sands and black mountains gave off dark side energy they could feel even from space. They had found Coraban, the ancient home of the Sith species, exactly as the old text described. The native Sith greeted these strangers with immediate distrust and anger. Sensing the newcomers' power in the Force, they tried to drive the Exiles away using illusions and displays of their abilities. Some of these shows revealed real skill, proving the natural Force talents the species had developed over the years. The Sith were determined to protect their home and assert themselves against these uninvited arrivals. But the Exiles, though without weapons and tired from their journey, were far more skilled with the Force than any tribal sorcerers. Years of war had sharpened their abilities and taught them techniques that went far beyond what the isolated Sith knew. The Dark Jedi used the Force itself as their weapon, defeating the Sith through superior training, teamwork, and knowledge honed over millennia. Finally, the native Sith gave up, recognizing these strangers were too powerful and that fighting would only get them killed. What followed was not partnership between equals, but conquest by the stronger over the weaker. The Exiles took control of Sith society step by step. It took weeks for them to fully understand how this alien culture worked, to find the weaknesses they could use and the traditions that would help them rule. The native Sith were divided into castes with strict rankings that had existed for thousands of years. At the top was a king who claimed to be descended from the legendary Adas, the only leader who had ever truly united the entire species. Ajunta Paul challenged this king, Hakagam Grouch, to single combat in front of the assembled Sith leaders. The duel was quick and final, ending when Paul cut off the Sith ruler's head with a single strike. By killing Grouch in traditional combat, Paul became the new king and took the title Dark Lord of the Sith, combining his Force training with Sith authority to create something new. The conquered Sith, especially the warrior group called Masasi, accepted their defeat and served their new masters. The Exiles were careful not to destroy the existing system, instead using it for their own purposes. Warriors fit naturally into Masasi traditions of combat and service. Those interested in alchemy worked well with the priest group, called the Kisai, who had their own ancient knowledge of changing life through the Force. The structures that native Sith had built gave the newcomers a perfect foundation for taking absolute power. Over time, what began as simple conquest evolved into something far more complex and lasting. The Exiles realized that the Sith had valuable knowledge of alchemy and Force techniques unknown in the Republic. The native Sith, in turn, gained access to better training methods and a much broader understanding of the Force than their traditions had taught them. As the years passed, marriages began between the two groups. Bloodlines mixed over the following centuries, creating children who combined the physical features of the Sith species with the knowledge and ambition of the Dark Jedi. Sorza Sin became Paul's chief advisor in building this new empire. She established schools to train the Sith in Force techniques that mixed Exile knowledge with native traditions. Meanwhile, other leaders who had been exiled from Korbos claimed their own territories across Sith space and trained their own students in the dark side. Zozan, Karnus Moor, and others became powerful lords in their own right, each ruling their own areas while recognizing Paul as the supreme Dark Lord. As the Empire grew, the term Sith gradually changed in meaning. It no longer meant only a species, but came to describe a philosophy and way of life that anyone could follow. Anyone who fully embraced the dark side and swore complete loyalty to the Dark Lord could become a Sith, no matter their species or background. This opened membership to far more people than if it had stayed limited to the original exiles or native species alone, making the Empire much stronger. On Coraban, massive temples and tombs rose in the Valley of the Dark Lords as the new civilization took shape. Each leader who died was buried in a massive pyramid-shaped tomb. Bodies were preserved through alchemy to stop decay, while spirits sometimes stayed behind through techniques that tied them to physical places where they could still influence the living. The valley became a place of great power where students came to test themselves and learn from the wisdom of the dead. A school was built to train new generations in the Sith ways, but it worked very differently from Jedi training. Unlike Jedi teaching, which stressed restraint, discipline, and working together, this system pushed students to compete and fight against each other. They were taught to see each other as rivals rather than friends, with the strong moving up while the weak were thrown out or killed. This harsh approach produced far fewer Force users than Jedi methods, but those who survived were powerful warriors who had earned their reputation through real combat instead of mere practice. The new Sith spent major resources on making weapons and creating techniques designed specifically to kill Jedi. They carefully studied old reports from the 100-Year Darkness, learning from the mistakes that had led to their defeat while finding ways to counter standard Jedi tactics. They created new Force abilities that took advantage of Jedi beliefs, turning the Order's greatest strengths like compassion and mercy into weaknesses they could exploit in battle. Most importantly, they never forgot what happened at Korbos. They never forgot their hatred for the Jedi who had defeated and exiled them, or their determination to take revenge. Every Sith child learned the history of their founding as one of their first lessons. Every Lord swore to destroy the Jedi Order completely and conquer the Republic that had thrown them out. The Empire became defined as much by this mission of revenge as by its belief in embracing the dark side and rejecting Jedi rules. On Ossus, the Jedi remained completely unaware of these developments in the unknown regions. The Council officially declared the 100-Year Darkness over and focused on the huge task of rebuilding. Masters worked to restore shattered worlds, train new students to replace the thousands who had died, and strengthen Republic defenses to prevent another war. In the unknown regions, hidden on Coraban and slowly spreading to nearby worlds, the Sith prepared patiently for their return. They built fleets and trained armies over generations, taking their time to do things right. They were willing to wait, knowing that the longer they prepared in secret, the more destructive their revenge would be. The galaxy settled into peace after the war ended. The Jedi and Republic strengthened their alliance and expanded into new territories. Trade grew again, connecting distant worlds and bringing prosperity. Civilization advanced quickly as resources that had been used for war were redirected to peaceful growth. To everyone in Republic space, the greatest threat they had ever faced seemed gone for good. 5,000 years later, the Sith would emerge from hiding and unleash a war that would nearly destroy the galaxy. In 5000 BBY, the Day of Reckoning finally came. Sith Lord Naga Sato launched a surprise attack. He used ancient hyperspace routes that Sith explorers had discovered over millennia. Sato had risen to become Dark Lord of the Sith through cunning political moves and demonstrated power. He believed the time had come for the Sith Empire to emerge from isolation and fulfill its destiny of conquering the Republic and destroying the Jedi. Sato's strategy was bold and risky. Rather than building strength slowly through border raids and limited attacks, he committed to a full-scale invasion immediately. He used paths that Republic navigators didn't know existed. This allowed Sith fleets to strike deep into Republic space without warning, bypassing border defenses entirely. The invasion caught the Republic completely unprepared. Military forces that had been fighting pirates and settling local disputes suddenly faced a coordinated assault by an empire they didn't know existed. Republic intelligence had no information about Sith capabilities, tactics, or objectives. Even the Jedi, despite their connection to the Force, hadn't sensed this threat building in the unknown regions. The Republic's first taste of Sith power came at Koros Major, and it was devastating. Republic forces led by Empress Teta, ruler of the Tython system, faced Sith warships equipped with technologies they had never encountered. Sith vessels used weapons that combined conventional energy beams with dark side enhancement, making them far more destructive than standard Republic armaments. Among those who responded was Jedi Master Odan-Urr, keeper of the archives on Ossus, the ancient Drathos who would live for over a millennium and whose interpretations of the Jedi Code would shape the Order for thousands of years, identified the Sith techniques immediately. His study of texts from the 100-Year Darkness gave him insights most contemporary Jedi lacked, and he advised Empress Teta on how to counter strategies that relied on intimidation and overwhelming force. The battle was brutal and costly, but the Republic ultimately won at Koros Major through superior numbers and Odan-Urr's tactical insights. Though the Republic won, thousands of soldiers lay dead and entire fleets were reduced to wreckage. More troubling, the Sith invasion had only been possible because of Gav Daragon, one of 2 Republic explorers who had accidentally discovered Coraban months earlier. Naga Sato had separated Gav from his sister Jory and spent months breaking down the young man's loyalty to the Republic. Sato exploited Gav's painful memories, the poverty, the hunger, the way Republic society had failed to protect 2 orphaned children living on the streets. He painted the Sith Empire as a place where strength was rewarded and the worthy were lifted up, unlike the corrupt Republic that had abandoned the siblings to suffer. When Gav appeared at Koros Major working alongside Sith forces, the beloved mechanic Arba was so shocked and disgusted that he spat on his former friend in contempt. The Masasi warriors guarding him saw this as an attack and immediately killed Arba before he could stop them. His actions had led to the death of an innocent man, shocking his sister Jory and forcing him to confront what he had become. The Republic was stunned by the Sith's sudden invasion, but the enemy wasn't finished with their assault on the core worlds. At the Battle of Kirek, Sith forces besieged the Koros system in a follow-up attack designed to break through the core worlds. Naga Sato realized that Koros was strategically positioned along hyperspace routes that led directly to Coruscant. If he could secure Koros, the path to the Republic capital would be open. Jedi Masters Odan-Urr and Uru made a heroic last stand that saved the system. Master Uru, an ancient Salesian who lived in a cyanogen gas-filled tank, made the ultimate sacrifice. He deliberately broke his containment vessel, releasing cyanogen gas that was toxic to most species, but fatal to the Sith forces surrounding their position. The gas killed Sith warriors by the hundreds, creating chaos in their ranks and breaking their assault. Uru died in the process, but his sacrifice gave Republic forces time to reorganize and counterattack. Odan-Urr, devastated by his master's death, channeled his grief into determination to ensure Uru's sacrifice wasn't wasted. He led the defense personally, coordinating Republic ships and Jedi strike teams until the Sith fleet was forced to retreat from Koros. The war spread rapidly across Republic space as Sith forces struck multiple targets at once. Naga Sato's strategy was to create so much chaos that the Republic couldn't mount coordinated resistance. By forcing Republic forces to respond to threats across dozens of systems, he prevented them from concentrating strength against any single Sith objective. Even the Republic capital wasn't safe from attack. On Coruscant itself, Sith Lord Shar Dakhan led an assault designed more for psychological impact than military conquest. Dakhan wanted to demonstrate that even the Republic's heart was vulnerable to Sith power. The Battle of Coruscant raged through the Senate District as Sith warriors fought Jedi defenders in the streets of the galaxy's most important world. Jedi Master Mehmet Nadel rallied the city's defense, organizing both Jedi and Republic forces to repel the invaders. Nadel had extensive experience with urban combat from previous conflicts and used that knowledge to turn Coruscant's architecture into defensive advantages. Narrow streets became killing zones where Sith numbers meant less. Tall buildings provided positions for Republic snipers. The civilian population, rather than fleeing in panic, supported Republic forces by providing intelligence about Sith movements. Nadel's leadership demoralized Dakhan's forces by demonstrating that even surprise attacks on the capital could be defeated. The Battle of Coruscant ended with a Sith retreat, though the city bore scars from the fighting that would take years to fully repair. More importantly, the successful defense showed that the Republic could withstand Sith aggression if properly organized and led. The war's climax came when Republic forces finally went on the offensive. The siege of Sato's forces at Primus Golud marked the war's turning point. Republic forces, having beaten back Sith attacks across multiple fronts, finally pursued Naga Sadow to his stronghold, determined to end the Sith threat permanently by destroying its leadership. Later, seeking redemption for his betrayal, Gav Daragon tracked Sato's fleet to its command post at Primus Golud. He infiltrated Sato's palace and destroyed the Dark Lord's force-meditating command sphere, disrupting the battle meditation that had been coordinating Sith forces. But Daragon was trapped when Sato, realizing his position was lost, triggered his final desperate weapon. The Primus Golud supernova was Sato's most desperate act, proving the Sith would rather destroy everything than surrender. Using ancient Sith magic combined with technological weapons, Sato caused the red supergiant star to go supernova. The resulting explosion obliterated everything in the system, including the Republic fleet that had pursued him and Gav Daragon's ship. The supernova created a massive shockwave that destroyed pursuit forces, buying Sato time to escape with his surviving warriors. The Republic fleet was annihilated, thousands of lives lost in an instant. The galaxy thought Sato had died in the blast, sacrificing himself to inflict maximum damage on his enemies even in defeat. In truth, Sato survived. He fled to Yavin 4 with the surviving Massassi warriors, a Sith subspecies that served as his personal army. There, he established hidden temples deep in the moon's jungles, going into exile but not death. Sato's survival meant the Sith threat wasn't truly eliminated, though this wouldn't be discovered for millennia. By the war's end, the Republic had routed the Sith invasion at tremendous cost. Naga Sato's apparent death at Primus Golud marked the fall of the golden age of the Sith Empire. The remaining Sith forces scattered, some returning to Coraban, while others disappeared into the unknown regions. The Jedi and Republic celebrated victory, believing they had permanently ended the Sith threat through superior strength and moral righteousness. Defeating this invasion bought a brief peace, but the Sith would return under new champions who had learned from Sato's mistakes and developed even more dangerous strategies. Nearly 1,000 years would pass before the next Sith threat emerged. When it did, it would come from within the Jedi Order itself. In 3996 BBY, two fallen Jedi named Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma were anointed as Dark Lords by the spirit of ancient Sith Lord Marka Ragnos, sparking the Great Sith War. The path to their fall began on Onderon, a world with a complicated history involving Sith influence dating back centuries. The planet had been ruled by descendants of darkside Force users who had fled Republic space after earlier conflicts. By 4000 BBY, this Sith legacy manifested as periodic conflicts between Onderon's civilized capital of Aziz and the Beast Riders who lived in the wilderness. Jedi Master Arca Jeth, one of the Order's most respected members, deployed his students to end the Beast Wars. Arca had established a Jedi Praxium on Arcania, where he trained numerous talented Jedi, including the Keldroma brothers Ulic and Kay. When Onderon's Queen Aminoa called for help against the Beast Riders, Arca sent his students to mediate the conflict. The fallen knight and his companions discovered that Queen Aminoa was secretly channeling darkside power inherited from Freedon Nad, an ancient Dark Lord whose spirit had influenced Onderon for centuries. With Arca Jeth's help, they drove out Nad's Sith-influenced forces and freed Onderon from darkside domination. This victory seemed complete, another example of the Jedi's ability to defeat darkside corruption through lightside purity. But Freedon Nad's spirit survived the Battle of Onderon and began corrupting promising Jedi from beyond death. Nad figured out that direct military invasion had failed during the Great Hyperspace War. A more subtle approach was needed, one that turned the Jedi's own members against them from within. Kun became Nad's primary target. Kun was a brilliant but arrogant Jedi Knight, student of the venerable Master Vodosiask Bas. His exceptional talent was matched only by his insatiable curiosity about Force mysteries. Kun's studies led him to legends of Sith lore preserved in the Great Library on Ossus. Where other Jedi read those accounts as warnings, Kun saw them as hints about power he could master. Kun's quest for forbidden knowledge led him to Freedon Nad's tomb on Duxun, Onderon's moon. There, Nad's spirit appeared to him, offering to share secrets the Jedi would never teach. Nad offered Kun forbidden knowledge that the Jedi Order would never share. He promised to unlock secrets that could make Kun truly powerful, playing on the young knight's frustration with Jedi restrictions. The corruption happened slowly, with Nad carefully feeding Kun's ego and desire for greater abilities. From Duxun, Kun traveled to Coraban following Nad's guidance. On the ancient Sith homeworld, surrounded by tombs of Dark Lords and filled with darkside energy, Nad's spirit completed Kun's corruption. The Jedi Knight embraced the dark side fully, believing he could control its powers without being controlled by it. This was the same fatal mistake countless others had made before him. With Nad out of the way after serving his purpose, Kun declared himself Dark Lord of the Sith. He traveled to Yavin 4, where he discovered Naga Sato's hidden temples and the surviving Massassi population. Using Sith alchemy and raw power, Kun enslaved the Massassi and forced them to build new temples according to his plans. When Kun learned of the rising Krath cult on Empress Teta, he saw an opportunity. The cult had been founded by cousins Alima and Sital Keto, but Jedi Knight Ulic had infiltrated their ranks. Instead of destroying them from within, the Knight had fallen to the dark side after killing Sital. Rather than fighting each other for supremacy, Kun promised they unite as Sith Lords working toward a common goal. The Jedi's attempt to address the growing Sith threat through discussion and planning would soon be shattered. In 3997 BBY, the Deneba Conclave represented the Jedi's attempt to address the growing Sith threat through discussion and planning. Jedi Masters, including Odan Ur, Arca Jeth, and Vodosiask Bask, gathered to debate how to respond to reports of darkside activity on multiple worlds. They hoped to develop a coordinated strategy that would prevent another war like the Great Hyperspace War. During the gathering, an army of Krath war droids attacked without warning. The droids had been smuggled onto the planet in small pods and launched from a Krath ship. They all activated at once, targeting the Jedi Masters. The goal was simple: kill the Jedi leadership before the war started. Jedi Master Arca Jeth was mortally wounded, protecting his students from droid fire. He died in Ulic's arms, using his last moments to impart final wisdom and express faith that his apprentice would continue serving the light. Arca's death broke Ulic, who had viewed his master as a father figure. Rather than strengthening his commitment to the Jedi, Arca's death filled Ulic with rage and desire for revenge that would lead him toward darkness. Now, the galaxy was about to learn that fallen Jedi were far more dangerous than any Sith invasion. The Great Sith War spread across the galaxy, matching the scale of the earlier hyperspace war. However, this time the threat came from within. Exar Kun struck first at Ossus, targeting the heart of Jedi knowledge. His attack on the Great Jedi Library was disastrous. Ossus had been the Jedi's home for over 20,000 years, and seeing it under assault shocked the entire Order. Standing against him was Jedi Master Odan Ur, defender of the library's central chamber. He was the keeper of the archives and one of the oldest Jedi alive, having survived the Great Hyperspace War 5,000 years earlier. When Kun finally arrived, Odan Ur tried to reason with his former colleague. He warned that the dark side's power would later destroy anyone who used it. But Kun was beyond redemption. He rejected these warnings and killed Odan Ur without hesitation. The Ancient Master's death sent a clear message. No Jedi was safe, no matter how powerful or wise. With the Defender fallen, Kun then ordered his forces to loot the library. They stole priceless holocrons and ancient texts, while surviving Jedi scholars fled for their lives. The loss of Odan Ur was catastrophic for the Jedi Order. Odan Ur had witnessed thousands of years of Jedi history, and his death meant centuries of wisdom vanished forever. Other Jedi could still read ancient texts and holocrons, but they lacked his first-hand experience and deep understanding. Meanwhile, the library's destruction was equally catastrophic. Thousands of documents were burned or stolen, representing wisdom that could never be replaced. Future Jedi would face enemies their ancestors had already defeated, but the strategies for victory were now gone. This single battle would cripple Jedi learning for generations to come. As the Order reeled from this loss, Ulic launched his own assault. Now fully corrupted and serving as Kun's apprentice, he led combined Krath and Mandalorian forces against Coruscant itself. Street fighting erupted throughout the capital as enemy troops battled Republic defenders block by block. The violence was worse than Shar Dakon's earlier invasion because the fallen knight knew Republic defenses from his years as a Jedi. The battle's climax came when the Dark Lord arrived to free Ulic, who had been captured by the Jedi after his attack faltered. Jedi Master Vodosiask Bas confronted his former student one last time, attempting through both combat and words to turn Kun back toward the light. The elderly master fought valiantly with his wooden quarterstaff enhanced through the Force, demonstrating techniques he had developed over decades of study. But Kun was too far gone in darkness to be reached through appeals to his better nature. He had created one of the first double-bladed lightsabers specifically for this duel, a weapon that gave him overwhelming offensive capability. Despite Vodo's skill and experience, Kun struck him down, killing the master who had trained him and believed in his potential. Vodo's sacrifice bought time for others to escape, but couldn't prevent Kun and Ulic from fleeing together. Supreme Chancellor Sidrona was also killed during the Battle of Coruscant, struck down by Sith attackers while coordinating Republic defenses. His death demonstrated that even the highest Republic officials were vulnerable during this war. The chaos following Sidrona's death temporarily disrupted Republic government, though new leadership eventually emerged to continue the fight. The final confrontation occurred on Yavin 4, where the Allied Republic and Jedi fleets converged on Kun's stronghold. The Jedi had decided that Kun had to be defeated decisively before he could strengthen his position any further. Every available Jedi was called to participate in this final assault, representing the Order's total commitment to ending the Sith threat permanently. On Yavin 4's surface, Kun conducted an apocalyptic ritual using Massassi spirits to free himself from his mortal form. He intended to become a spirit of pure dark side power, immune to physical harm and effectively immortal. If successful, Kun would become unkillable by conventional means, able to influence the galaxy indefinitely without risk of death. The Jedi fought back with a technique never seen before. Every Jedi in the fleet combined their power, sending a massive wave of light-side energy toward Kun's ritual site. This joint effort showed what the Jedi Order truly represented: many individuals working together for a common goal, using their abilities to protect rather than destroy. When the dark and light clashed, a massive explosion occurred. The explosion wiped out Yavin 4's forests for hundreds of kilometers, destroying everything in its path. The blast was so powerful that ships in orbit could see the shockwaves spreading across the moon's surface. When the flames died down, Kun's body was gone. The Jedi were certain they had finally killed him, but they were wrong. Kun's spirit had become trapped on Yavin 4, bound to the temples he had built. His consciousness remained imprisoned there, unable to escape, but also unable to truly die. This would cause problems thousands of years later, but for now, the Jedi thought the threat was over. Meanwhile, Ulic faced a different punishment. Jedi Master Nomi Sunrider had lost her husband to this war and watched her friend fall to darkness. In her grief and anger, she used a powerful Force technique to cut him off from the Force completely. Stripped of the power he had craved, the fallen Jedi collapsed in despair. He was now just an ordinary man who would have to live with the terrible things he had done. Now, the Sith armies, leaderless and broken after losing both Dark Lords, surrendered or fled into the unknown regions. The Jedi, in time, triumphed, but the galaxy was left scarred by the revelation that their own members could fall so far and cause such destruction. Unfortunately, peace would not last long, as a new threat emerged from an unexpected quarter. 3 centuries of peace followed the Great Sith War. The Jedi rebuilt their order on Ossus, working to recover the knowledge lost when their great library was destroyed. Meanwhile, the Republic expanded into new territories and strengthened its institutions. Both seem to have learned from the devastating conflict. But in 3976 BBY, Mandalore the Ultimate had transformed his people's warrior culture into something far more dangerous. Traditional Mandalorians had always valued honor and martial skill, but the new Neo-Crusader movement preached that honor could only come through conquest. Mandalore led his warriors on brutal campaigns across the galaxy, seeking worthy enemies to assert Mandalorian superiority. The first major strike into Republic space came at Althir in 3976 BBY. The attack was sudden, catching Republic forces completely off guard. Canderous Ordo, a Mandalorian warrior who would later play a key role in the Jedi Civil War, led a clever feint that broke through the defenders' lines. Mandalorian forces poured through the gaps, crushing isolated Republic positions before they could respond. Althir III fell quickly, becoming the first Republic world to face Neo-Crusader occupation. 3 years later, the Battle of Cathar revealed the true horror of Mandalorian warfare. Under Field Marshal Cassus Fett, the Mandalorians didn't just conquer the planet, they wiped out its people. Mandalorian forces drove civilians toward the oceans and unleashed basilisk war droids to slaughter them. Over 90% of the Cathar species died in a single day. When news of the massacre reached the Republic through refugees and intelligence reports, leaders faced a difficult choice. Both the Chancellor and Jedi Council decided to hide the truth from the public. They worried that revealing the genocide would cause panic and destabilize Republic worlds. This decision, while strategically understandable, meant most citizens had no idea how dangerous their enemy truly was. As the galaxy burned, the Jedi Council chose to do nothing. The Council argued that the Jedi served as peacekeepers and mediators, not soldiers. They feared that taking sides in the conflict would transform the Order into a military force, repeating mistakes that had nearly destroyed them during previous wars. This position had strong philosophical justification. The Jedi Code emphasized peace and protecting life. Joining a war, even to defend innocence, meant accepting responsibility for deaths on both sides. The Council trusted that patience and diplomacy would resolve the crisis without large-scale violence. Many Jedi throughout the Order agreed with this stance, trusting in the Council's wisdom. But two young Jedi Knights saw things differently. Revan and Malak, brilliant students who had distinguished themselves in numerous peacekeeping missions, grew increasingly frustrated with the Council's inaction. They argued that the Jedi's purpose was to protect the innocent, and the Mandalorians were slaughtering innocents across the Outer Rim. Standing aside while atrocities occurred was itself a betrayal of Jedi principles. In 3962 BBY, Revan and Malak defied the Council and formed the Revanchists, a faction of Jedi who joined Republic forces fighting the Mandalorians. The name Revanchist meant revenge seeker, chosen deliberately to signal their commitment to making the Mandalorians pay for their crimes. Hundreds of Jedi followed Revan into war, believing that defending the innocent justified disobeying the Council. His tactical genius quickly became apparent once he took field command. He studied Mandalorian tactics and culture extensively, learning to predict their movements and exploit weaknesses in their warrior code. He won victories that had seemed impossible through conventional tactics, using unconventional strategies that caught Mandalorians off guard. Supreme Chancellor Tol Kressa acknowledged Revan's abilities and appointed him Supreme Commander of Republic forces, giving him authority to coordinate all military operations. Mandalorians were winning, and everyone knew it. The Republic counteroffensive, under the Jedi's command, pushed the Mandalorians back system by system. Revan won battles at Duxun, where he outmaneuvered Mandalorian forces in the moon's dense jungles. At Onderon, he used knowledge of the planet's terrain from previous Jedi missions to trap Mandalorian armies between Beast Rider guerrillas and Republic regulars. Across the Outer Rim, his strategies steadily drove the Mandalorians toward a final confrontation. Revan realized that defeating the Mandalorians militarily wasn't enough. Their warrior culture meant that they would keep fighting unless thoroughly beaten in a way that shattered their identity. He studied Mandalorian history and emphasized that only defeating their leader in single combat while destroying their military capacity would truly end the threat. The Battle of Malachor V in 3960 BBY was designed to achieve both objectives simultaneously. Revan lured the Mandalorian fleet to Malachor V, a planet strong in the dark side due to ancient tragedies. While fleets clashed in orbit, the Jedi confronted Mandalore the Ultimate in single combat aboard the flagship. The duel was witnessed by warriors from both sides, making it the public demonstration Revan intended. Revan defeated Mandalore in what became a legendary confrontation, killing the Mandalorian leader and claiming his mask as a trophy. But the battle's true horror came from the weapon deployed by Republic forces at his command. The Mass Shadow Generator, a superweapon developed specifically for this battle, activated while both fleets were fully engaged. The device manipulated gravity to tear both fleets apart simultaneously, annihilating Mandalorian and Republic ships alike. Thousands died instantly as the weapon created a wound in the Force itself, a place where the normal connection to the Force was permanently damaged. Among those who survived the weapon's activation was a Jedi who had followed Revan into war and who would later become known as the Jedi Exile after facing judgment for her role in the battle. In a single day, the mighty Mandalorian war machine was broken forever. Their fleet was destroyed, their leader dead, and their warrior culture shattered by defeat at the hands of a single Jedi. Revan imposed harsh peace terms, forbidding the Mandalorians from ever again forming a unified army. Despite their success, victory came with unexpected consequences. The Jedi Council publicly rebuked Revan for his crusade, though they privately acknowledged it had saved the Republic from conquest or destruction. More concerning were reports that Revan and Malak had departed immediately after the war for the unknown regions, seeking something they claimed had been manipulating events from the shadows. The Council sensed something terrible was happening, but lacked the information or ability to prevent it. The Republic's greatest hero was about to become its greatest threat. What emerged from his fallen empire would be even worse. The Republic military rebuilt faster than anyone expected. Throughout the Dark Wars, Republic officials worked frantically to rebuild while the Jedi faced extinction. When the Sith Empire finally broke apart into competing territories, the government seized the opportunity. Every shipyard was pushed to maximum production. The Navy was almost completely rebuilt in just over a year. This showed the Republic's industrial power when political will aligned with necessity. Military campaigns against Sith warlords revealed both strength and weakness. Strategic planning improved at the sector level. Defense forces moved more competent than expected. Lost territories were reclaimed piece by piece. By the time Republic forces eliminated the last Sith warlords, the government appeared fully recovered. However, appearances hid deeper problems. Wars left scars that would not heal quickly. Corporate influence in the Senate grew dramatically as businesses took control when leaders fell. The Emergency Terrasa Regulation Act explicitly promised naval protection for corporations on specific exchanges. This created a corrupt system where profit motives regularly conflicted with defense needs. Senator Hadel Garavis of Taris showed both corruption and redemption. Originally a corporate enforcer who bribed his way into the Senate, something changed during his service. When Taris fell during the Jedi Civil War, Garavis personally organized civilian resistance. He became a passionate advocate for occupied worlds and refugees. He demonstrated individuals could change even within corrupt systems. The Republic asked the impossible: trust those who had already betrayed you. Officers like Cartho Nassi had remained loyal despite personal tragedy. Now they found themselves serving alongside former Sith sympathizers whose loyalty remained questionable. Many of these officers had switched to the Sith for practical reasons during the war: better living conditions, higher pay, newer equipment. When the conflict ended, they simply returned to Republic service with little accountability. The result was predictable. Trust within the military suffered. Compared to what the Jedi faced, these problems seemed minor. After the Dark Wars, the Jedi Order stood closer to extinction than ever in its 36,000-year history. The first Jedi Purge had reduced their numbers to mere dozens scattered across the galaxy. The temples stood empty, the archives lay destroyed, and the Council was gone. For the first time since the Jedi gathered on Tython, the Order might simply fade into history. But one woman refused to accept that fate. Scholars would later learn her true name, Meetra Surik. In those dark days, she remained simply the Exile. Stripped of her Force connection at Malachor V, cast out by the Council, she had wandered the galaxy as a wound in the Force itself. Her journey to defeat the Sith Triumvirate cost her nearly everything. Yet in 3951 BBY, she returned to Malachor V, and she didn't rest. She immediately began rebuilding, and her companions became the foundation. Those who traveled with Meetra understood what the Order needed. Besus Mar, who survived Darth Nihilus's destruction of Qatar, brought a deep understanding of loss and endurance. The young scholar Michael possessed the knowledge necessary to preserve Jedi teachings. Atton Rand had found redemption despite his past as a Sith torturer, proving he could resist darkness. Brianna's combat skills would be essential for the Order's survival. Mira's knowledge of the underworld could protect against threats others might miss. Bao Dur, haunted by his creation of the mass shadow generator, dedicated himself to building rather than destroying. Together, this unlikely group played prominent roles in rebuilding the Jedi Order. Rebuilding turned out to be slow and difficult. Restoring what existed before was impossible. The old council was gone. The Dantooine Temple lay in ruins, and satellite academies had been systematically destroyed. Everything had to be rebuilt from scratch. Mitra knew that near destruction had revealed deep weaknesses in the Order. The rigid hierarchy had failed to adapt when crisis struck. The Council's refusal to act during the Mandalorian Wars had driven their best knights to defiance. Moreover, their inability to detect the rise of Darth Revan and Darth Malak showed dangerous blind spots in their training. The revelation that so many Jedi could fall to corruption suggested their teachings about the Force were dangerously incomplete. Thus, the new Order would need to embrace different principles, more flexibility in decision-making, greater willingness to act when circumstances demanded it, more honesty about the existence and nature of the dark side, rather than pretending that simple avoidance provided immunity. These reforms would take years to implement. New students would need training, salvaged knowledge would need preserving, and defensible learning centers would need establishing. Only then could the Order slowly grow stronger. Sadly, Mitra would not be there to see it completed. In 3950 BBY, roughly 1 year after defeating the Triumvirate, she received devastating news. She met with Bastila Shan, Revan's wife. T3M4 revealed that the former Jedi had not simply disappeared. He had been captured by the true Sith Empire, an ancient civilization hiding beyond known space for over 1,000 years. Bastila entrusted Mitra with Revan's mask and asked her to find him. The request placed the Exile in an impossible position because the Order desperately needed her leadership. Her companions still looked to her for direction on critical decisions, and the rebuilding had barely begun. Without someone to coordinate their efforts, everything they had worked for could easily collapse. Still, for her, some debts mattered more than duty. The former Jedi had been her commanding officer during the Mandalorian Wars, and he had seen her potential when others doubted. He had trusted her with command of half the Republic fleet at Malachor V, even knowing the terrible price the battle would demand. The bond forged between them in war could not be ignored. She then made her choice. She entrusted the continued rebuilding to her companions, believing they possessed both the strength and wisdom to complete what she had started. Then, she departed Republic space with T3M4, following the trail that would eventually lead her to the hidden Sith Empire on Dromund Kaas. Over the years following Mitra's departure, her companions continued the work of restoration. New students were trained in the ways of the Force, salvaged knowledge was carefully preserved, and new learning centers were established on worlds that could be defended. The rebuilding proceeded slowly but steadily. The Order never regained its former size. Where thousands of Jedi had once trained in grand academies, now only hundreds studied across scattered facilities. Survival alone was victory. Against all odds, the Jedi Order endured. Months after leaving Republic space, Mitra's search led her to Nathema, the dead world where Sith Emperor Vitiate had performed his terrible ritual 1,000 years earlier. There, she discovered records that pointed to Dromund Kaas, the capital of the true Sith Empire. Infiltrating the Sith capital was surprisingly easy for someone who had spent years operating in the galactic underworld as an exile. Posing as a mercenary, she quietly gathered information about Revan's location. An unlikely alliance formed during her investigation. Her search brought her into contact with Lord Scourge, a Sith Lord who served on the Dark Council. Scourge had grown disillusioned after learning the Emperor's true plans, which went far beyond simple conquest. Vitiate did not merely want to defeat the Republic. He wanted to consume all life in the galaxy, feeding on the Force itself until nothing remained but emptiness. Scourge thought that such madness would destroy everything, including the Sith themselves. Together, the Jedi and the Sith Lord located Revan. They found him imprisoned by Darth Nihilus, another member of the Dark Council. The rescue operation succeeded, though barely. The former Jedi had been held captive and tortured for years, his mind kept in a constant haze to prevent him from accessing the Force. When Mitra returned his mask to him, The physical connection triggered the return of his suppressed memories. With his full power restored, Revan destroyed Darth Nerys, and the three of them escaped together. Freedom from one prison only led them toward a more dangerous confrontation. Revan knew what Scourge had learned through years of serving the Dark Council. Emperor Vitiate was different from every enemy who had come before. His goal was not conquest, but total annihilation. Left unchecked, he would ultimately consume all life in the galaxy. A desperate plan took shape between them. They would infiltrate the Emperor's citadel on Dromund Kaas and strike at him directly. Both the Jedi knew their chances of success were minimal at best. They knew the danger, but some fights could not be avoided. In the Emperor's throne room, one choice changed everything. As the former Jedi and the Exile prepared to face the Emperor, Lord Scourge experienced a Force vision that shattered his resolve. He saw the Emperor's defeat at the hands of a great champion, but that champion was neither his companions. The vision revealed multiple possible futures branching out before him, but none of them showed victory in the present moment. Scourge realized with a terrible clarity that if they fought the Emperor now, they would fail and die. In that instant, Scourge made his choice. He chose the possibility of future victory over certain death in an unwinnable battle. Once the Emperor unleashed his full power against Revan, Scourge suddenly turned on his allies. He drove his lightsaber between Mitra's shoulders, killing her instantly. The shock of her death through their Force bond ruined Revan's concentration for a moment. The Emperor seized that opening and struck him down with torrents of dark-side lightning, burning and torturing him until he collapsed unconscious. Upon seeing his master's suffering, T3M4 attempted desperately to defend him with his built-in flamethrower, but the Emperor destroyed the loyal droid. Mitra's body lay motionless on the throne room floor. Revan lay broken and barely breathing beside her. The battle that was supposed to save the galaxy had ended before it truly began. Scourge quickly claimed that the killing blow had been part of his plan all along. He explained that he had intendedly allowed the Jedi to believe he was their ally, only so he could deliver them directly to Vitiate's judgment. The Emperor, though suspicious of this sudden betrayal, accepted the explanation. As a reward for his supposed loyalty, Vitiate granted Scourge immortality through a dark-side ritual. However, the gift came with a terrible price that he had not anticipated. Constant, unending pain that would never cease. Scourge became the Emperor's wrath, his personal enforcer and executioner, bound to Vitiate's will for all eternity. The Emperor then commanded Scourge to execute the former Jedi and complete the betrayal. At the last moment, Vitiate suddenly stopped him. The Emperor had recognized something valuable in Revan's mind that made him too useful to simply kill. Rather than allow his death, Vitiate ordered Revan imprisoned in a specially designed stasis chamber. There, kept in a specially designed prison between life and death, he would serve two purposes. The Emperor could feed on his Force energy, while also pulling information about the Republic's military strength and weak points from his mind. What the Emperor did not realize was that the connection flowed both directions. Revan, even while imprisoned, possessed enough willpower to quietly influence the Emperor's thoughts over time. He reinforced Vitiate's natural caution and patience. He fed the Emperor's fear of death. At every opportunity, he planted suggestions that invading the Republic was too dangerous and far too early. The mental war would continue for 3 centuries, with Revan fighting to delay the invasion that seemed inevitable. But he was not fighting alone. When Mitra died on the throne room floor, her spirit did not become one with the Force as expected. Bound by loyalty and love, her consciousness remained anchored to the physical world, hovering just outside Revan's prison cell. Though they could not speak directly to each other, the Exile's presence sustained him through the long years ahead. As the Emperor fed on the former Jedi's power, Mitra allowed her ally to draw strength from her in return. In the darkness of his imprisonment, her presence kept him alive. When his resolve weakened under the endless torture, she gave him the will to continue. When the Emperor's hunger threatened to consume him completely, she provided just enough energy to keep him fighting back. The sacrifice of two of the galaxy's greatest heroes was not in vain. Back in Republic space, the Jedi Master never learned what truly happened to him after he left. In 3954 BBY, roughly 4 years after Revan's departure into the unknown regions, she gave birth to their son, Vanner. The name was an anagram of his father, chosen deliberately to honor him. When the Sith Triumvirate began hunting down the few surviving Jedi across the galaxy, Bastila went into hiding. She had to protect both herself and the boy who carried the bloodline of two exceptionally powerful Force users. She moved carefully between safe houses, trusting only a handful of contacts, and waited for the threat to finally pass. After the Triumvirate was eventually defeated and some stability returned to the galaxy, Bastila resumed her place within the rebuilding order. She achieved the rank of Master and trained students throughout the following decades. Her teaching emphasized practical survival skills alongside traditional philosophy, lessons shaped by years spent in hiding with her son during the Triumvirate's reign. Throughout these years, Revan's wife occasionally sensed his presence across the vast distances between them. The Force bond they had forged during the Jedi Civil War persisted despite the impossible separation. She felt him in quiet moments of meditation and took these sensations as proof he still lived somewhere, still fighting for something she could not fully understand. Soon, Vanner grew into adulthood without showing any Force sensitivity. This surprised everyone who knew about his parents' exceptional abilities. Nevertheless, he found his calling in politics and leadership instead. The Republic needed skilled negotiators and unifying voices after decades of constant warfare. Vanner possessed both the intelligence and the famous family name to make genuine progress in the Senate. By 3900 BBY, he had become one of the Republic's most influential political figures. His colleagues urged him to seek the position of Supreme Chancellor, confident he would win the election easily. Vanner married a woman named Emis and fathered 2 children together. His daughter Risa and son Bress both displayed strong Force sensitivity, proving the gift had merely skipped a generation in the bloodline. Bastila saw their potential early on, sensing in them the traces of their grandfather's considerable power. In 3900 BBY, Vanner visited his elderly mother on the anniversary of her marriage to his father decades earlier. During their conversation, he asked the question that had troubled him for years, whether she thought it was possible that his father was still alive out there. She admitted she could not say for certain, but she pointed to the evidence surrounding them every day. The Republic endured despite everything. They lived without constant war or the need to flee their homes. The galaxy had not descended into the catastrophe Revan had warned about. Whatever he had done in the unknown regions, it seemed to have worked. They could live their lives in relative peace. For that simple fact, she remained deeply grateful. Bastila soon died at an old age, never learning the full truth of Revan's fate or his ongoing imprisonment. She passed away believing he had succeeded in his mission to protect the galaxy from whatever threat he had discovered beyond known space. Her death marked the end of an entire generation that had survived the Mandalorian Wars, the Jedi Civil War, and the First Jedi Purge that followed. The Shan bloodline continued through Vanner's Force-sensitive children and their descendants. Several generations later, it produced Tassiel Shan, who became a respected Jedi Knight. Tassiel's daughter, Satel Shan, eventually rose to become Grand Master of the Jedi Order during the Great Galactic War against the Sith Empire. This was the very conflict Revan had delayed through 3 centuries of mental resistance and imprisonment. His great-great-great-granddaughter would lead the Jedi against the same threat he had sacrificed everything to postpone for as long as possible. The Emperor's planned invasion of the Republic never came during those critical decades. In 3681 BBY, when the true Sith Empire finally emerged from hiding, the galaxy witnessed the beginning of what became known as the Great Galactic War. For 28 brutal years, Republic and Imperial forces clashed across countless worlds throughout known space. The conflict destroyed entire civilizations, from the core worlds to the Outer Rim, shattering economies and claiming millions of lives on both sides. By the time the war finally ended, roughly half the galaxy had fallen under direct Sith control. Sith forces attacked Republic diplomatic ships in the Tingle Arm without warning, killing hundreds of civilians before anyone understood what was happening. When the Republic fleet rushed to respond, they flew straight into a trap. Local governments in the Dalanbian sector had secretly allied with the Sith Empire, turning on Republic forces the moment they arrived. The fleet scattered in disarray, forced to retreat to the core worlds, while the Sith Empire seized control of sector after sector. The pattern of Sith brutality became clear within weeks of the war's start. At Sluis Van, Sith forces destroyed vital shipyards and slaughtered everyone who refused to immediately swear allegiance to their emperor. Cooperating worlds received Sith governors, while those that resisted faced genocide or enslavement. Republic military personnel were hunted down and executed on sight. The Senate paralyzed itself with endless debate while the Outer Rim burned. Some senators insisted that the Sith were merely another upstart species that patience and diplomacy would defeat. Others recognized the threat but disagreed violently over where to deploy their limited forces. The Jedi Council took action without waiting for Senate approval, deploying hundreds of Jedi to defend the Minos cluster. There, in months of grinding warfare across multiple worlds, the Jedi held their ground against superior numbers. They demonstrated that the Sith Empire could be resisted successfully. The courage of these Jedi Knights inspired Republic citizens across the galaxy to join the fight. Recruitment centers soon overflowed with volunteers eager to fight alongside the Order against the Sith threat. The Jedi Order fought on the front lines throughout the long struggle. Among them stood Satel Shan, descendant of Revan and Bastila, who would in time become one of the Republic's greatest heroes. As a young Padawan studying under Battlemaster Kao Sendarik on Coraban, she witnessed the Sith recapture their ancient homeworld firsthand. Darik sacrificed himself in combat to allow her escape and warn the Republic. His death marked the beginning of her transformation from student to leader. Satel distinguished herself across multiple battlefronts in the years that followed. In 3671 BBY at Bothawui, 10 years into the war, she helped achieve a crucial Republic victory that halted the Sith advance toward the core worlds. Admiral Greik had predicted the Sith move into the system and positioned the entire Republic fleet in ambush. When the Sith battle group arrived seeking to exploit the recent momentum, they found themselves surrounded. The trap succeeded with minimal Republic casualties, routing the enemy in what became a major turning point in the war. However, the Sith Empire sought immediate revenge. Shortly after the fleet's departure, Sith forces returned in overwhelming numbers. More than 50,000 troops assaulted the planetary shield generator that protected Bothawui. Jedi Master Belth Elusis, a prominent council member, had volunteered to remain behind with only 4,000 Republic troops and several dozen Jedi to defend the installation. Despite the impossible odds, Master Elusis organized a defense that made the attackers pay dearly for every meter of ground. The siege dragged on for days. For every defender who fell, no less than 10 Sith soldiers died in return. Moff Zelos, commanding the Sith forces, responded to each repulse by sending even larger waves, which only increased his mounting casualties. When the perimeter finally broke and only a few dozen defenders remained around the shield generator itself, Zelos sent an envoy offering surrender and mercy to those who remained. Master Elusis and his troops refused the offer. They fought even more fiercely than before, determined to hold their position. When the dust finally settled, every single defender lay dead on the battlefield. But the Sith had suffered such devastating losses that Zelos was forced to retreat without taking the generator. The planetary shield still protected Bothawui from orbital bombardment. The story of Elusis's last stand spread rapidly across the Republic, inspiring courage in citizens and soldiers wherever it was told. The Jedi achieved other important victories during the Long War. In 3668 BBY, after 13 years of mysterious Republic ship disappearances in the Outer Rim, Jedi Knight Jarek Kaden led an elite strike team that captured the Dreadmasters. This group of ancient Sith Lords had been using battle meditation to project waves of terror across Republic fleets, crippling crews with fear before battles even began. Near the war's end, Sattel led Jedi forces to victory at Ren Var, driving back another Sith assault in one of the Republic's final major triumphs. Unfortunately, the Republic's string of victories following Alderaan was short-lived. In 3665 BBY, the Sith Empire ambushed a Republic convoy escorting newly commissioned prototype warships over the ice world of Hoth. Though the advanced technology aboard these ships allowed many crew members to survive who otherwise would have perished in the attack, the fleet was forced to abandon the prototypes on the planet's surface. The frozen surface of Hoth became littered with their wreckage and debris. The loss was crushing to Republic naval strength at the worst possible moment in the war. 3 years later, in 3662 BBY, the Sith Empire unveiled the full extent of its strategic cunning. For years, Sith intelligence had been quietly manipulating events in the gladiatorial arenas on Geonosis, building up a young fighter and carefully orchestrating his rise to fame among the crowds. When this manufactured champion had achieved sufficient glory and recognition, he departed Geonosis and called for Mandalorians across the galaxy to join him under his banner, invoking the ancient tradition of the Mandalore. Hundreds, then thousands of warriors answered his call within weeks. The newly united Mandalorian forces established a complete blockade of the Hydian Way trade route, effectively cutting the Republic's critical lifeline between the Outer Rim and core worlds. The Republic fleet, still recovering from its losses at Hoth, was unable to break through the blockade. Jedi strike teams and starfighters attempted the assault, but suffered humiliating defeat against the prepared Mandalorian armada waiting for them. On Coruscant, food supplies ran dangerously low as shipments ceased. Riots erupted in the lower levels of the city. Starvation spread throughout the planet's population. Even the most hawkish senators began privately discussing surrender as the Republic's darkest hour approached. Just when defeat seemed certain, salvation came from an unexpected source. A young Mirialan smuggler named Hylo Viz, operating under Nar Shaddaz's cantinas, saw a huge chance to make credits. She gathered a mixed fleet of mercenaries, pirates, and smugglers, loaded massive freighters with supplies from the Outer Rim, and carried out a daring plan. Her heavy freighters approached the blockade and stopped just short, drawing the Mandalorians out. When the enemy moved to attack, hundreds of light freighters and small ships dropped out of hyperspace behind them. Republic Strategic Information Services spotted the attack happening and rushed backup. The Mandalorians, caught between three forces, were defeated. Hylo delivered her cargo to the core worlds, accepted a huge payment, and disappeared before the Senate's medal ceremony. The blockade was broken, but the Mandalore, who had united the clans, died in the battle, forcing a new leader to work quickly to maintain their unity. Despite these victories, they could not prevent what came next. In 3653 BBY, the Dark Council made an unexpected offer of peace to the Republic's Senate. While representatives from both sides met on Alderaan to discuss terms, the Sith prepared their true goal, a crushing strike against the Republic's heart. Mandalorian mercenary Shae Vizsla sneaked onto Coruscant and shut down the planet's defense grid. With the capital's shields down, Darth Malgus led 50 Sith warriors directly to the Jedi Temple. The assault team crashed through the ancient building's entrance, fighting the defenders in brutal combat. Master Ven Zalo commanded the temple's defense, but despite fierce resistance, the Jedi fell one by one. Malgus personally struck down Zalo, and the surviving Sith planted explosives throughout the building. As the temple burned, Darth Angrel's fleet appeared from hyperspace and bombarded Coruscant from orbit. Sith forces swept across the surface, taking government buildings and executing Republic officials. Supreme Chancellor Baruchan died in the assault. For 2 days, the Sith Empire occupied Coruscant under military control, stealing from the world and holding its population hostage. The death toll reached tens of thousands, possibly over 100,000. With their capital captured and the Jedi Temple destroyed, the Republic had no choice but to accept the Treaty of Coruscant. The agreement forced the Republic to abandon friends, give up vast territories to the Sith Empire, and pull back forces from every battlefield across the galaxy. Worlds that had fought alongside the Republic for decades suddenly found themselves alone, many falling quickly to renewed Sith attacks. When the Jedi returned to Coruscant to save what remained of their temple, they faced an angry Senate. Politicians blamed the Order for the Republic's shame. Despite Grandmaster Zim's efforts to keep cooperation, the Senate declared in 3650 BBY that the temple's rebuilding would be delayed with no set date. The Order faced more tragedies after the war ended. Grandmaster Zim was assassinated in a planned attack that also bombed the Senate Tower, killing an entire generation of the Order's youngest members. Neither attack showed signs of Sith involvement, suggesting a third party or internal plot at work. During the complicated withdrawal process required by the treaty, Master Dar Nala, who had worked closely with Sattel throughout the war, was killed by Darth Angral during a fight on Dantooine, where Republic forces and some Jedi had first refused to stand down despite treaty orders. Across the Republic, public opinion had turned against the Jedi. Their ancient home lay in ruins, and they were no longer welcome in the capital world. Faced with these circumstances, the Jedi made a major decision. They would leave Coruscant and return to their origins. Sattel Shan, now a master widely respected in the Order, accepted the task of finding them a new home. Guided by the Force, she traveled into the deep core, a region of space so dense and unstable that most hyperspace lanes had collapsed ages ago. There, against all odds, she rediscovered Tython. The birthplace of the Jedi Order had been lost for more than 22,000 years. Sattel emerged from the deep core with new navigation charts showing stable routes through the dangerous region. The first exploration of Tython took months as Jedi scouts searched the surface and discovered ruins of ancient temples older than the Republic itself. The search proved dangerous, with lives lost to the harsh landscape, attacks by the native flesh raiders, and other poorly understood threats. Despite these challenges, the High Council saw Tython's importance. The Council sealed themselves in meditation for 1 week, fasting and seeking guidance from the Force before choosing the site for their new temple. They picked a location against a mountain range, built on the foundations of an ancient structure that had stood when the Order first began. Construction started 1 year after the Jedi established permanent settlement on Tython. Using local stone and timber, working with designs that were different from Coruscant's grand buildings, the Order completed their new home in 3 years. The temple's design reflected changed priorities. Where Coruscant's temple had shown power and permanence, Tython's emphasized humility and patience. The architecture was modeled after the castles of Alderaan, honoring one of the war's most important battlefields. In keeping with the philosophy of non-attachment, the new temple avoided the grand displays of its predecessor. Everything about the structure reminded the Jedi of their purpose, not to dominate or impress, but to serve and protect. On Tython, the Jedi hoped to reconnect with the beliefs and ideals of those who had founded the Order 20,000 years earlier. They searched the planet for holocrons and artifacts left by ancient masters, seeking to replace the knowledge lost when Coruscant's temple fell. They built meditation chambers, lecture halls, and archives. They created training grounds where a new generation of Padawans could learn what it meant to be Jedi. Slowly, carefully, they worked to repair relations with those who blamed them for the war's destruction. The Treaty of Coruscant ended the Great Galactic War, but it did not bring true peace. Instead, it brought what became known as the Cold War, a tense standoff where Republic and Sith Empire faced each other across a divided galaxy. As Jedi Master Nos Dural recorded in the archives, this was a time of the Jedi reconnecting with their roots, the Republic healing its wounds, and the Sith building their power in a galaxy split between darkness and light. Satele Shan rose to become Grand Master of the Order during this period, the youngest Jedi ever to hold the position. Under her leadership, the Order slowly rebuilt its strength on Tython. The conflicts between Republic and Sith Empire continued through the decades that followed, breaking into open warfare before cooling into uneasy truces, a pattern that would repeat for years to come. Over time, though not for many centuries, the Jedi would return to Coruscant. In 3500 BBY, several decades after the sacking, the temple was rebuilt, and the Order brought back its presence to the capital world. The rebuilding continued in stages over the following thousands of years. The Great Jedi Archives were completed in 2519 BBY, followed by another major addition around 2000 BBY. The temple's distinctive spires were finally rebuilt in 1019 BBY. Throughout these centuries of construction, Tython remained important to the Order, but Coruscant once again became the Jedi's main seat of power. The peace would not last forever. In 2000 BBY, Jedi Master Fanius fell to the dark side, took the name Darth Ruin, and founded the new Sith Empire. His actions triggered the Fourth Great Schism, starting the new Sith Wars that would last for the next 1,000 years. The new Sith Wars were defined by three trends: the rise of the Sith, the decline of the Galactic Republic, and growing aggression within the Jedi Order. The balance of power shifted constantly. At times, the Republic seemed close to victory, while at others, complete collapse appeared near. The Sith attracted powerful allies, including the Devaronians and Hydians, as the conflict spread across all regions of space. In 1466 BBY, more than 5 centuries into the conflict, Sith forces achieved one of their most decisive victories at the Battle of Mizra. Republic and Jedi forces were crushed in a terrible defeat that shifted momentum strongly toward the Sith. From that point forward, the Republic found itself constantly on the defensive, struggling merely to survive rather than hoping to win. The final century of the new Sith Wars from roughly 1100 to 1000 BBY became known as the Republic Dark Age. During this period, the Republic essentially stopped functioning as a unified government. The Senate granted almost all authority to the Supreme Chancellor, and many who held that office were Jedi attempting to hold civilization together through sheer will. Thousands of worlds were abandoned to Sith control or to lawlessness. Major corporations went bankrupt. The Republic shut down hyperspace relays beyond the core, colonies, and parts of the Inner Rim, cutting off instant communication with the Outer Rim and disrupting trade across the galaxy. Faced with the Republic's inability to protect its citizens, Jedi took matters into their own hands. They joined together in groups to defend individual worlds and entire regions of space from Sith Lords, pirates, slavers, and warlords. In some areas, Jedi supported existing governments. In others, Jedi became rulers themselves, taking direct control to shield populations from outside threats. The troubled regions were divided by Supreme Chancellors into Jedi baronial sectors in an attempt to coordinate the continuing war. These Jedi Lords, as they came to be known, commanded their own military forces and governed their territories with considerable independence from Coruscant. The Jedi Order's transformation during this period was deep. Where once the Jedi had been thoughtful guardians who avoided political involvement, they now commanded armies and ruled territories. A Republic navy and army fell increasingly under Jedi control as the civil government collapsed. A separate Jedi Grand Council emerged, operating independently from the traditional High Council on Coruscant and coordinating the activities of the Jedi Lords across their scattered domains. In 1010 BBY, the fragmented Sith forces found unexpected unity. A renegade Jedi named Skir Khan, who had been trained on Coruscant and prepared by the High Council as a champion against the Sith, instead turned to the dark side. Khan had mastered the rare ability of battle meditation, making him extremely valuable. He also held extreme beliefs about the Republic and Jedi being responsible for the galaxy's chaos. When the High Council was unable to moderate his views, Kaan led a group of loyal knights away from Coruscant and joined the Sith. Kaan reorganized the feuding Sith warlords into a unified force called the Brotherhood of Darkness, more than 20,000 strong. In an attempt to end the destructive infighting that had plagued the Sith for centuries, he made a major change. He ended the tradition of a single Dark Lord of the Sith. Instead, he declared that all Sith Lords were equal within the Brotherhood, united by the creed of rule by the strong. The Brotherhood established its headquarters on the planet Rune and launched a coordinated campaign that threatened to finally destroy the Republic. In response, Jedi Master and General Hoth rallied the scattered Jedi forces into a unified Army of Light. The army consisted of the forces commanded by various Jedi Lords, organized into 7 main legions of light, each led by a powerful Jedi. These legions included both Force-sensitive warriors and regular soldiers who had sworn loyalty to the Jedi and their cause. With them came a range of skills and knowledge, warriors wielding traditional weapons, technicians, medics, and support personnel, all united in the desperate fight to save civilization from darkness. The final confrontation between these two great armies took place on Ruusan, a world near Kashyyyk. 7 terrible battles were fought on that planet, and with each engagement, both sides suffered massive losses. The once lush world was transformed into a barren wasteland. Supplies ran out, and morale collapsed as conditions became increasingly harsh for both armies, but neither side would retreat. By 1000 BBY, during what became known as the 7th Battle of Ruusan, Lord Kaan made a desperate decision. He chose to deploy an ancient Sith weapon called a thought bomb, a terrible device that would kill everyone in its blast radius by trapping their Force essences for eternity. The instructions for creating this weapon had been secretly provided to Kaan by Darth Bane, another Sith Lord who had his own plans for the future of the Sith Order. Lord Hoth learned of Kaan's final plan. Rather than follow the Sith Lord to unleash such horror unopposed, Hoth took 99 of his most trusted Jedi Knights and confronted Kaan directly. He attempted to convince the Sith not to detonate the weapon, arguing that such destruction served no purpose. Kaan refused to listen. When the thought bomb detonated, both Kaan's Sith army and Hoth's company of Jedi were destroyed instantly. Their Force essences were absorbed into the weapon, while their mortal bodies simply ceased to exist. The battlefield fell silent. Lord Valentine Farfalla and Jedi Master Berethan led the Army of Light's survivors off Ruusan and into orbit. The remaining Sith forces, leaderless and broken, were quickly defeated. The new Sith Wars had finally ended. The Jedi and Republic believed they had achieved total victory, thinking the Sith had been wiped out to the last individual. They were wrong. Darth Bane survived, retreating with his apprentice to rebuild the Sith under a new philosophy. But the Jedi would not learn this truth for 1,000 years. Lord Farfalla traveled to Coruscant at the request of Supreme Chancellor Tarsis Valorum. Valorum outlined his plan to reform the Republic, which had decayed over 2,000 years of constant warfare. The reforms that followed became known as the Ruusan Reformations, and they fundamentally reshaped galactic civilization. The Republic was reborn in its modern form. Galactic history was officially reset, with calendars and records starting fresh from this point. This time before the Reformations, including all the conflicts of the new Sith Wars, faded into a collective memory known simply as the Old Republic, a dark age that later generations would struggle to understand. The Republic military was disbanded, leaving the Republic without major armed forces for the first time in thousands of years. The Jedi Order underwent equally major changes. The Army of Light was disbanded. The Jedi Lords surrendered their territories and military forces. The Order focused its efforts on Coruscant, closing most satellite facilities and regional power bases. Most importantly, the Jedi consciously moved away from the aggressive teachings and warrior culture that had defined them for so long. They returned to their original purpose as peacekeepers, guardians, and students of the Force. With the Sith assumed extinct and the wars finally over, the Republic and the Jedi entered an age of peace and prosperity that would later be remembered as the Golden Age. The year 1000 BBY marked not just the end of a war, but the end of an entire era. The Ancient Jedi period, spanning more than 35,000 years from the first Force Sensitives gathering on Tython to the final battle on Ruusan, had finally come to a close. The Jedi Order that came out of the Ruusan Reformations was completely different from what had come before. The warrior monks who had ruled territories and commanded armies transformed into thoughtful peacekeepers who avoided political involvement. The strict structures gave way to more flexible approaches. The emphasis on individual heroism and personal power shifted toward shared wisdom and careful thought. This new order, cleared of its aggressive elements and convinced that the Sith threat had ended forever, would remain largely unchanged for the next 1,000 years, until the Clone Wars would force them to become warriors once again. For centuries, from the first Force Wars on Tython to the near extinction during the Dark Wars, the Jedi had struggled to find balance between light and dark, between action and thought, serving the galaxy and preserving themselves. Failures outnumbered successes. Corruption by power, blindness by strict beliefs, and near destruction by stubbornness all mark their history. From this conflict, something important arose. The Dark Wars changed the Jedi Order forever. The survivors who rebuilt it recognized harsh truths. The dark side could not be ignored, only resisted. Tradition could be as dangerous as corruption, and sometimes the right choice demanded everything. Most importantly, they learned that survival alone was not enough. The Order had to serve a purpose beyond its own preservation. It had to stand for something worth the terrible cost that defending the light demanded. Revan and Mitra showed this lesson in their final actions. They had not fought the Emperor because they believed they could win. They fought because fighting was the only choice that honored everything they had struggled to become. They sacrificed everything, knowing their sacrifice might end up being meaningless because the alternative was to abandon hope entirely. This was the legacy of the Ancient Jedi, purchased at a price that could never truly be measured. 36,000 years of history, from the first Force Sensitives gathering on Tython to the final stand against the Sith Emperor, had led to this moment of terrible clarity. The Jedi had once maintained that studying both light and dark in equal measure would bring balance. They were wrong. The Jedi who fought the Force Wars learned that only by choosing the light could balance be maintained. They were right, but incomplete in their understanding. The Jedi of the Golden Age regarded peace and thought were the highest calling. Through blood and loss, they learned that sometimes peace could only be defended through war. Finally, at the end of the Ancient Era, the two Jedi demonstrated the ultimate truth. Balance in the Force was not achieved through meditation or study or even through victory in battle. It was achieved through sacrifice, through the willingness to give everything, including the hope of personal survival, for the possibility that others might live free from the darkness that threatened to consume them. The Ancient Jedi Order's story ends not with triumph, but with endurance. The Order survived because individuals chose to rebuild when extinction seemed certain. Mitra Surik gathered the scattered survivors. Revan fought a battle he could never win for 300 years to buy time. Ordinary Jedi like Visas Mar, Michael, and Atten Rand dedicated their lives to preserving and passing on what had been won at such terrible cost. The cycle of conflict between light and dark did not end with the Dark Wars. The Sith would rise again. The Jedi would face extinction again. Yet the foundation laid during those desperate years would last. The lessons learned through failure and sacrifice would be remembered by those who came after, even if the names of those who taught them were forgotten. This was the way of the Force. They produced heroes willing to sacrifice everything for others. They built an order that stood against darkness for ages untold. When extinction seemed certain, they found the strength to rebuild. This is the legacy of the Ancient Jedi. But none of these events would have been possible without the choices of one man whose fall started this chain of destruction. The Republic's greatest hero became its most terrifying threat, then found redemption through love and sacrifice. To understand how a single Jedi's decisions nearly destroyed the Ancient Order and ultimately saved it, watch Revan's complete story next.